Ryusuke Takao was the most ordinary college student. His life did not stand out, and it seemed that it would always be so. But once, because of a stupid joke of a friend, he was late for classes and, in a hurry, fell under the wheels of a motorcyclist. When the young man woke up, the world around him turned out to be completely different. He was full of chaos, darkness, and sinister creatures that torn people to pieces. It was a real apocalypse. Before his eyes, one of the warriors, gritting his teeth, swung to deliver a crushing blow to a giant octopus. However, the monster, contrary to the laws of nature, in the blink of an eye restored the lost flesh. The fighter froze in shock, realizing that the creature has incredible regeneration, and now it is not clear how to defeat him. The guy looked at what was happening with a bitter irony. More recently, he himself believed that he was a chosen hero designed to save the world. However, cruel reality quickly dispelled these illusions and made it think about it. In his first life in this hell, the young man went outside with a group of survivors and was instantly surrounded by the horde of zombies. They died one after another. And after his death, the young man suddenly woke up at the same starting point. He decided to act more carefully, avoiding clashes with monsters, but died of hunger. For the third time, he tried to merge with a crowd of zombies, hoping to deceive them, but was shot by the military. In the fourth life in Ryusuke Takao, supernatural abilities awakened. But he did not manage to use them. The partner betrayed him and stabbed him immediately after the construction of the protective base. The fifth and sixth life ended equally ingloriously, and he returned again and again on the first day of reincarnation. Now it was his ninth awakening, and Ryusuke seriously doubted that he had at least some hope of surviving. Meanwhile, the battle continued. A huge monster waved his hard tentacles, and the fighters in a panic decided to retreat, throwing their companion, unhappy Miyabi, to their fate. The girl begged them to stop. Tears shone in her eyes. A voice broke into a cry, but no one even turned around. Left alone in the face of imminent death, she resigned to the fact that her life would end. Ryusuke, looking at the lady, suddenly realized one truth. Since he could not break out of this world, perhaps you should try to do something useful before your next death. Without hesitation for a second, the guy grabbed the weapon and rushed forward. Powerful energy spun around him. His eyes flashed wildfire. The fighters who watched him from afar could not believe their eyes. This desperate type seemed to be ready to die. But Ryusuke did not think about death. He resolutely waved his sword. And the next second, the vile tentacles of the monster coldly cut off. The creature howled in pain, and Miyabi, shocked by what had happened, fell to the ground, unable to restrain her tears. Rising, she thanked Ryusuke with a trembling voice, because he had just saved her from imminent death. However, the duel was not yet over. The monster was still breathing, which means it was dangerous to stay here. The guy briefly threw that he needed to leave immediately. In front of him, a door leading to the store suddenly appeared, and the hero, without hesitation, rushed inside. The room was full of food and water, and he could collect everything he wanted and carry with him. Stopping for a moment, the young man ate with pleasure everything that he came across. After that, he took a sip of cola. For the first time in a long time, having felt a familiar taste again. Who would have thought that in the world, teeming with monsters, you can find such a simple moment of pleasure? Meanwhile, the monster was not going to give up. It waited behind the door, not losing sight of his victim. When Ryusuke went outside, the monster was already ready to attack, but the guy, busy with his thoughts, did not immediately notice the threat. The hero, still enjoying a delicious drink, told himself that this time he has not a single regret. However, a wave of anxiety suddenly covered him. The next instant, the young man was belatedly realized that something was wrong. The young man blinked, looked around, and realized in horror. He again returned to the point of his awakening. Is the guy not died? Or is it the beginning again? In this situation, it is difficult to understand. Trying to figure it out, he began to examine himself, when suddenly a voice rang out nearby. The system said that Ryusuke Takao really died and was revived. And after a moment, there was a dry notification. The system was activated. She introduced herself as his exclusive terminal, in a mysterious voice announcing that he was now connected with her. Hearing this, Ryusuke almost sobbed, grabbing her in his hands. Finally, he had a chance to change the course of events. But why did she not appear before? Why did he have to go through 9 meaningless deaths before getting at least some hope? Suddenly, the system slipped out of his hands, and the guy looked around in confusion. However, the conductor reassured him, saying that something completely explained had happened. The guy, puzzled, asked what kind of problem it was, because he wanted to know in more detail. The system explained that his neighbor in the room pulled out the cord from charging, and now the alarm clock did not work. Ryusuke involuntarily grinned, but quickly discarded this. The main thing is that now he has a system, which means that there were opportunities. The question was what she could offer him. With hope he asked if he had at least some weapons or cheat abilities. But the conductor in response only stated that he would first explain the rules of the game. This world of the apocalypse, the place that needs to be stopped, and its task is to break the vicious circle. If the hero can handle it, will be able to return to his world. But if he fails, he will be in hell. In addition, he had 10 attempts to survive, but of which already 9, the guy was wasted. Ryusuke flashed with indignation, but the system dryly stated that the quarrels are not right now. Every minute on the account, and now he must do everything possible to survive. At the next moment, the young hero enveloped a bright radiance. He looked around in surprise. The system announced that the young man will have his first mission. He can earn points selling sweets, and accumulate 50 nuclei in this way. These resources will increase the status, expand the territory, and get additional opportunities. Ryusuke Takao clenched his teeth with rage. He was in an extremely dangerous place where enemies lied around every angle. With all his might, the young man shouted that it was necessary to find a life jacket. Otherwise, he could not survive. Zombies turned around. They stared at the hero with unexpected amazement. One of the monsters turned, not being distracted from his victim, which he ate with appetite. Ryusuke Takao could not understand why the outlet was in such a place full of zombies. Was it really impossible to find a safer zone? The young man rushed away. At such a pace, he himself will soon become a lunch for these creatures. The guy rushed without looking back. A crowd of insatiable monsters rushed behind him. Suddenly, the system appeared right in front of Ryusuke Takao. The mentor was surprised why he was running away. The guy shouted that if he stopped, he would eat him. But the next moment, the hero braked sharply. An unexpected thought occurred to him. After all, he has a system, which means that he will be able to cope with a low-level zombie. Ryusuke Takao looked straight in front of him. He called the system that finally reported that her name is 2032. The young man stared in front of him. He wanted to know everything about this world and his abilities. If he has speed and strength, he can easily deal with enemies. However, to his horror, Ryusuke Takao realized that all his characteristics, except for intelligence, are at the lowest level. The conductor explained that the hero is only at the beginning of the journey. If he wants to become stronger, he will have to earn points and exchange them for improvements. The guy with disappointment grabbed his head. The only thing that he had is pumped his wisdom. The next moment, Ryusuke Takao barely managed to dodge the monster who tried to pounce on him. The young man in despair again rushed to flee, screaming that the system deceived him, promising help. The conductor assured that he told the truth. Ryusuke Takao really has a place for trade, but so far he has not even realized all its value. The guy doubted whether he was talking about this piece of garbage on which he traded. The system explained that this is not just a fabric, but a special item that will help him survive. But the young hero hardly believed in her words. The next second, his gaze fell on a stick lying at his feet. Deciding that the best weapon was now, this is at least something, he reached for her. Meanwhile, the evil monster was already crept into Ryusuke Takao. The guy turned sharply, preparing to strike. In less than a second, a young hero brought down a powerful blow, and the zombie scattered into pieces. The guy did not stop. He began to attack the rest of the monsters who filled the street. It was necessary to end them once and for all. But the monsters continued to advance, surrounding him from all sides, trying to knock him down. At some point, Ryusuke Takao could not stand it and collapsed to the ground. The stick fell out of his hands. The young man rolled several times, eventually being closer to the outlet. But the next moment he pulled himself in his hands, raising himself. He saw that the zombies were approaching again. Terrible creatures with burning eyes rushed at the hero. But he no longer felt fear. This was not the most successful entry, but, despite the attempts to survive, Ryusuke Takao was sure that he had lost. The monsters were too aggressive. The young man thought with horror that this was the end. But suddenly a bright flow of air rang out from above, so dazzling that the young man closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes, a huge, terrible monster towered in front of him. The rest of the zombies began to step aside as if giving way to a new enemy. Ryusuke Takao in confusion watched what was happening, unable to believe his eyes. The young man sat motionless while the undead slowly left. But why? The young man could not understand what exactly caused their retreat. The system finally gave an explanation. It was not just a piece of fabric, but a special object. A protective barrier. The guy could not believe. He considered it garbage, but it turned out that it was she who saved his life. Ryusuke Takao was beside himself with joy. This luck allowed him to get rid of enemies. The young man asked whether the fabric works only on the zombie, or she would protect it from other creatures. The conductor explained that while he is within the kiosk zone, all the damage received is reduced to 0. This information meant a lot, Ryusuke Takao thought, in attempts to realize the importance of the discovery. The next moment the guy rose. Now he could walk calmly, without fear of attacks. He became invincible, but the system warned that it is too early to rejoice. The subject can only be used 3 times a day. If you do not fulfill the mission on time, the effect would disappear. Soon the conductor sent a notification. Only 30 minutes were left before sunset. At night, the zombies became even more aggressive, so Ryusuke Takao should hurry. The guy looked around anxiously. Not a single person left in this damned place, and to whom he is going to sell sweets. But suddenly, a young man heard someone's voice nearby. Someone joyfully said that today he managed to get an incredible number of bullets. It was a gang of bandits. One of them was happy that he managed to find a small souvenir for the boss. Ryusuke Takao thoughtfully watched these people who were approaching him. Strangers stared at the young man, trying to understand who he was. When the men came closer, their eyes moved to the range of goods. In front of them were sweets resembling marmalade. It is strange why this is sold in such a place. With a slight smile on the face of Ryusuke, Takao offered chips and juice, suggesting that travelers might like it. The men were delighted here, so many things. They did not eat normal food for almost 3 years, and had already forgotten its taste. Meanwhile, the guy said that today is his first working day, and they are his first clients. In honor of such an event, he is ready to make a good discount and sell the goods in just 50 nuclei. For several moments, the men looked at each other, exchanging mocking looks. But soon they burst out with a loud laughter. This little one is really so naive or just pretends. One of them prepared a weapon and with a grin stated that he has a good mood today, so the seller can leave everything here, and then he will be left alive. Ryusuke Takao looked at strangers warily. It turns out that they have no cores. He calmly said that in this case he would not give them anything and they could leave. However, the bandits were not going to leave empty-handed. One of them aimed, and the next moment the bullet escaped from the machine gun. The young man turned away sharply, and a protective shield flashed around him. It was unthinkable. A bright flash blinded the bandit, but before he managed to realize what was happening, his own shot was reflected and hit him at an incredible speed. The man staggered and collapsed to the ground. He was under the shock. His friends stared at him with horror, trying to understand what happened. Never before they saw anything like that. Their friend looked terribly caustic. Fiery steam fell from his mouth. It remained a mystery how the bullet could ricochet so quickly. Does this guy have an incredible hidden ability? Ryusuke Takao felt and sat down on the rug and thanked him for the salvation with a smile. However, the bandits were not going to let him go. They came closer and demanded an explanation. The young man arrogantly noticed that no matter how many abilities in the world, there is only one child chosen by God. He offered them a deal. For 50 nuclei they could sign an agreement with him, because such opportunities fall infrequently. But the bandits only looked at each other skeptically. They did not believe a single word, suspecting that the young man simply bluffed, trying to confuse them. This is probably another trick. Ryusuke shrugged and sighed. It seems that these people do not know how to listen. They probably really need to feel pain in order to believe. He offered to approach. One of the bandits could not stand it, waved his fist, but to his horror, he discovered that there was no blow. The young man was protected. The attacker cried out, but could not do anything. Moreover, his own hand was hopelessly broken as a result of an unsuccessful attack. The second bandit grabbed the knife, intending to defeat the young man, but still hesitated. His partners with anger shouted that they had to act, while there was still a chance. Ryusuke Takao coldly looked into his eyes and did not utter a word, but his gaze was quite severe. The bandit froze in confusion. For a few seconds he just looked, unable to move. The young man raised his hand, and powerful electric energy began to form around him. The only moment passed, and the hero soared into the air, tearing his legs from the ground. The bandits backed up in horror, having a speechless speech. Now there was no doubt. This guy was not a man. One of them rushed to run in a panic. His comrades screamed, begging not to leave them here. But when they saw that everything was lost, they also took to flight. Ryusuke Takao tried to stop them, saying that he just wanted to know where people gather, but none of them answered. The young man looked up in a frustration in the direction of the escaping opponents. He again was left alone. However, his attention was attracted by the left bag. The hero carefully approached. Noticing that he was moving, Ryusuke Takao was even more surprised. It was strange. Carefully sticking his finger, the guy thought about this animal or something else. Without wasting time, he untied the ropes and impatiently thought that it could be. And at the same moment, some creature rapidly jumped out of the bag. Ryusuke recoiled, trying to consider who in front of him. It turned out that it was a woman. Probably she spent a long time in captivity. For a few moments she stood, turning away, breathing heavily, as if she did not believe that she was finally free. The girl looked thoughtfully upward. It lasted quite a long time. Finally, she slowly turned around. In her gaze, there was something that was impossible to solve. But in spite of everything, Ryusuke Takao could not look away. This girl was truly beautiful. When the stranger heard these words, she was instantly alerted. Apparently, they very much surprised her. The next moment, the lady sharply rushed to the guy, and he had to flee. The young man understood that he was not the time to admire, because her gaze was definitely unusual. Such eyes could only belong to a zombie, a ruthless and impregnable monster. Meanwhile, the girl almost overtook him. A powerful stream of energy thickened in her hands. In the next instant, she attacked. But Ryusuke Takao miraculously managed to dodge. The young man was discouraged, and could not understand what was happening. This is definitely not the usual speed of the zombie. A store from weapons was lying on the ground, and the guy, hoping for salvation, bent down to grab him. At the same moment, he sharply began to wave this object right in front of the stranger. Having caught the moment, he threw the store towards the girl. She barely managed to cover her face. But even this moment of delay was enough for Ryusuke Takao to rush. Soon the hero reached his counter with goods and approached the rug. But he immediately remembered that he had already used his ability 3 times. The young man regretted that he was not prudent. If this lady caught him, he was doomed. A zombie flashed right above his head. She quickly flew through the air. Then she deftly landed, gazing at the guy. Ryusuke Takao froze, cried out in horror, but no longer hoped for salvation. The young lady looked harsh. Magical discharges emanated from her. Sparks sparkled. Ryusuke Takao burst into bitter tears and waved his hands, begging her not to approach. But the opponent did not seem to hear him. She was rapidly advancing, clutching her teeth in a silent thirst. Her movements were quick, and empty eyes did not express a single emotion. At hand, the guy had some object, a bag of goods. Without hesitation, he squeezed it tightly, trying to come up with at least some way to escape from imminent death. In despair, he threw a bag towards the zombie, shouting that she was behind. This was his last chance. Although there was practically no hope for success, he was already saying goodbye to life. Closing his eyes, Ryusuke Takao prepared for death. He knew that he could not be saved, and simply waited for the inevitable. His heart was pounding furiously, and his body constrained a cold tremor. But for the seconds they walked, but nothing happened. He lurked his breath, not understanding why he was still alive. Finally, in amazement, the guy opened his eyes, hoping to see the explanation of the situation. Before him, a zombie with an appetite rushed a treat that fell out of a bag. She no longer looked dangerous, and her movements became smooth, as if she had enjoyed every piece. This went on for quite some time, apparently. She really liked the taste of treats. She chewed carefully, completely focusing on food, forgetting about her previous goal. Finally, the girl chewed the last piece with satisfaction and swallowed with pleasure. Now in her gaze there was that terrible aggression that scared him a few minutes ago. The world suddenly ceased to seem so terrible. Now it did not look so formidable, and in her appearance even some peace was even red. Ryusuke Takao still could not believe his salvation. Do zombies really love dried squids? But the next moment, the girl crawled to his fours, moving quickly and decisively. Her fingers scratched the ground, and her eyes remained chained to the guy. A dumb request froze in her eyes. The lady was still hungry. Her lips trembled, and the movements became sharp, like a predator who did not want to miss her prey. The young man looked around, but with chagrin realized that Kalmarov was no more. Now it was not clear how to get out of the situation, if suddenly it again became aggressive. Ryusuke Takao hoped that the other yummy would also like a zombie and she would not pursue him. He did not know how legible she was in food, but there was no choice. Having thought a little, he took marmalade sweets and opened the packaging. He could only hope that sweets could distract it in the same way as seafood. Trembling with fear, but trying not to show this, the young man threw a candy directly in her mouth. She again began to chew with pleasure. Apparently, she also liked this taste. Ryusuke Takao warily watched her, realizing that everything was going well. Slowly crawling back, he scattered sweets on the ground, not daring to come closer. But he suddenly realized that he no longer had a firm surface under his feet, and was on the edge of the cliff. Turning around in horror, Rasuke Takao became convinced that this was really so. It was even difficult to imagine, but the hero was not at a loss. Quickly throwing the remaining sweets into the abyss, he hoped that the zombie would follow them. The girl rushed down with lightning speed, not seeing anything but goodies. Rasuke Takao took a breath. For such a beauty, he does not feel sorry for all the sweets. Turning around, he noticed a fallen knife on the ground, which could certainly be useful. The young man lifted him and was surprised to see that this was a very high-quality weapon, sharp and comfortable. But suddenly he realized that this knife was not so simple and hides some signs. Engraving looked old but clear, clearly designed for a careful gaze. A symbol of Karadan was visible on the handle, and he appeared there clearly not by chance. This sign was known to a few, but everyone who saw it understood how seriously it was. Karadan, a cruel group of robbers in the world of the apocalypse. If Rasuke Takao understood correctly, then their leadership was an evil, a dangerous personality, about which terrible rumors went. These people do everything they want. Even the military cannot stop them, and any resistance only leads to the destruction of opponents. Their power spread everywhere. The young man could not believe that those 3 bandits were their subordinates. Now it became clear why they had such a cool weapon, and why they behaved so confidently. In addition, the bag in which the zombie was located was an incredibly strong, very convenient thing, and the young man decided to take it with him. Perhaps it will come in handy in the future. Suddenly, a strange, luminous object appeared at the bottom of the bag. He flickered with a mysterious radiance, attracting attention. Rasuke Takao immediately realized that this was something valuable. Rasuke Takao took it out and found 50 nuclei inside. It was unexpected, but extremely pleasant. Now he had resources, which were enough for a long time. The young man did not expect to fulfill the mission so easily, and could not get enough, clutching a bag of money to himself. Now he had everything that was needed for further plans. But suddenly the system said that if he took someone else's, this is not considered. The young man did not agree, because it was the zombie ate all the sweets, and this is the profit for her gluttony. The conductor noticed that the argument was quite reasonable, but still the creature was zombies. Rasuke Takao objected that buyers should be people. But is the system so greedy as to disagree with it, in which case he is not able to do a great job? Then the young man fell to the ground, indicating that it was already night, around anyone. And if he could not take this money, he was ready to die at the same second. The system sympathetically noticed that the hero was very problematic. A moment later, she announced that the mission was completed. The inventory was unlocked, and the rank of the stall is increased. In the next second, a street skeleton of a higher level appeared, looking very presentable. All objects sparkled with bright light, neatly laid out in order. Rasuke Takao, confused, looked around this miracle. Larak was just gorgeous. The hero opened the system and realized that this is a place for objects, an unexpected but practical solution. The assortment had all the necessary products: water, rice, meat, vegetables. The hero glanced incredulously at the conductor. Really nothing like a potion or weapon. The system explained that this is a street barley, not a military warehouse, especially since he was just a beginner and still does not know how. After these words, the young man finally became convinced that his patron is greedy. In addition, the guy discovered that to purchase any item, a certain number of points needed. The conductor explained that all the characteristics are at the lowest level, and the only thing that can be exchanged is basic things. Rasuke Takao grabbed his head in despair. It was unfair. The only thing that pleased, the ability to fully repel the attack 3 times a day. But the young man could not endlessly run away from enemies, so he decided that he needed to become stronger to protect himself. He asked the system to provide him with everything necessary for health, and the patron promised to fulfill the request. After that, the young man exchanged with the vehicle meaningful views. Then he touched his body, hoping to feel some changes, but the strength was not felt. The patron announced a new mission: collect 100 cores per day and find staff. The young man froze in confusion. Find so many nuclei and hire employees for such a stall seemed completely impossible to him. Suddenly, a gust of wind brought him in the face of some strange piece of paper. The announcement depicts a beautiful girl, good-naturedly inviting to the cafe. This surprised him. He thoughtfully said that perhaps this is a cafe from the world that no longer exists. I remembered how this girl handed out leaflets near his college, often handing them to him. A wave of unbearable longing rose in his soul. He would like to know how she was doing. It would be great to work with such a cute girl. Rasuke Takao plunged into sweet dreams. A moment later, the hero finally decided that now he has a motivation, and he will complete all the tasks. Meanwhile, near the cliff it was quiet and deserted. Hot magma raged below. A few seconds passed before an amazing creature jumped out. It was the same zombie girl who recently tried to attack Ryusuke Takao. Probably she survived. She looked around, thoughtfully examining the streets destroyed by evil monsters. And then she lowered her head low. Her face expressed a deep, irresistible sadness. Residelessness froze in the eyes, and despair moved with incredible sadness. After some time, the young lady rushed forward, making the final decision. Meanwhile, Ryusuke Takao stopped in front of a large abandoned building. Strange voices came from the inside. The young man carefully opened the door and looked inside. There were evil zombies. The undead stared with surprise at the stranger who dared to invade their possessions. The guy immediately slammed the door and, taking his breath, apologized for anxiety. But a moment later, he realized the horror of what was happening. These zombies are the same that he saw yesterday, and insatiable monsters have already seen the goal and quickly rushed in pursuit. They greedily approached. One of them performed a lightning jump. The air was heated from tension, but at the very last moment, when the monster almost reached the stall, he was thrown back by invisible power, a protective shield. Ryusuke Takao shouted to the zombies so that they would get away. He was not going to waste protection. It could only be used 3 times. Therefore, the young man rushed to run. The confused undead tried to catch up with him, but could not. One of the zombies crashed into an invisible barrier and was thrown back, flying with great speed. The next moment, he collapsed to the ground, receiving a crushing blow. Rising, the monster published an evil cry. His eyes flashed with rage, and the mouth opened widely. The dead man intended to grab Ryusuke Takao by the leg, and he almost succeeded. The guy turned sharply, the attack from behind, vilely and cowardly from his enemies. The young man again used his strength. Powerful electric discharges forced the enemy to retreat. The zombie staggered sharply, his mouth opened in a soundless scream. The blow threw it right to the massive machine gun behind. The rest of the monsters were perplexed in what had just happened. The machine hit, ruthlessly pressing the zombies. The terrified limbs stuck out from under the heavy structure. Ryusuke Takao was shocked and was surprised to look at what he had done with just one blow. The next second, the young man felt incredible delight. He really became stronger than before. The system congratulated him and said that this was the first victory over the enemy. As a reward, the hero received a one-time cloak. The young man thoughtfully scratched his chin. The conductor explained that he was made of high-tech material, waterproof, retains heat, and most importantly, you can swim with him in the contaminated ocean. Ryusuke Takao has doubtfully twisted a collar in his hands. Is the fabric really so incredible? Meanwhile, the zombies continued to approach. They did not reach their goal and were not going to stop. Ryusuke Takao looked at the opponents in confusion. He was distracted, and now he was surrounded. The hero tried to figure out, but the fear prevented the situation. The situation was terrible, and the very nature of what happened earlier attracted monsters. However, the hero did not see the way of retreat. If this continues, he will die. Suddenly, to the ear of Ryusuke Takao came a sharp proposal to come here. The guy turned around and saw a stranger. The hero again looked at the iron machine, behind which the enemy was crushed. And on the other hand, insatiable monsters inexorably approached, opening terrible mouths. Ryusuke Takao froze in confusion. The moment was intense, and he was feverishly looking for a way out. After a moment, the young man understood that the only reasonable option to approach the girl. When the door in front of the zombie's nose closed, the monsters could no longer get inside. Losing his breath, the hero thanked her for his help. He was still in a shock. The young lady looked bewildered and asked in surprise, did he really know her? Ryusuke Takao recalled that he often passed through a university cafe with milk tea and took a flyer there. In fact, the girl did not remember such visitors, but she did not upset him and said she remembered. According to her, he played basketball and loved tea with tapioca with the taste of peach. Ryusuke Takao corrected her. He was in a football team and hates peaches. The girl was not upset. She shrugged and said that it doesn't matter. In any case, she is pleased to meet. After that, she introduced herself as Arisa Miyasa. The guy also named his name. Arisa smiled, repeated his name aloud several times. Ryusuke Takao cried with delight. He was amazed that such a cute girl called him by name. At that moment, Arisa drew attention to the bottle on the floor. She stirred sharply. The young man turned around. His face instantly became wary. He asked who was here. A few seconds passed. Ryusuke Takao stared at an unusual object. Then he took the bottle in his hands, carefully studying it. The hero realized that it was Suddenly, a dazzling ray of light broke out, completely illuminating his face. Ryusuke Takao stared thoughtfully at the door that began to move. There was someone there. He slowly reached for the pen, his whole body tensed. It was difficult to guess what awaited him behind the door. Suddenly, the cries of Arisa rang out behind him. She screamed about the appearance of the mouse. With despair in her voice, the girl said that this vile creature had run nearby. Ryusuke Takao retreated from the door and asked exactly where. The girl replied that the mouse had already run away, but she was still scared, and at that very moment, the door was silently opened. A strange creature peeked out of the dark room. His red eyes flickered in the twilight. Arisa lost consciousness and immediately collapsed down. The young man barely managed to catch her. The guy asked in alarm what happened to her. How could this happen? He could not believe that she was in this state. Her pale face and a weak voice bothered him. When the girl opened her eyes again, she weakly said that she was terribly hungry, because she had not eaten nothing for 5 days. The body was trembling, and complete fatigue was red in her eyes. Ryusuke Takao assured that she had nothing to worry about. The young man will help in everything, and now she will not be left without food. Confidence that could reassure in his voice. The young man got up and said that he would find what to feed her, because he had reserves. The guy could not leave her in such a state, especially knowing how she suffered. He took out the products, wondering that it was better to cook, rice, or noodles. Everything depended on the fact that she would like more. The main thing is that the food helped her restore strength. Suddenly, Arisa's face was darkened. The stranger turned out to be the owner of food, and this alerted her. In this world, those who have reserves rarely share them just like that. The girl arrogantly approached him, and in the meantime, he sang something under his breath. It seemed that the guy did not notice her tense gaze and hidden suspicion at all. There were many necessary products, eggs, flour, even oil in the stall. It was a rarity in their world, where food was worth its weight in gold and was almost always in short supply. Arisa Miyasa looked at the guy in surprise. From where he had so much food, completely incomprehensible. So many supplies could belong only to a very influential person. The next moment, her face has become cunning. This type may be useful. Perhaps it should be held together while it can provide himself and surrounding foods. Without thinking twice, she picked up an egg in her hands, but it instantly disappeared. Panic gripped it. Without the permission of the owner, it was impossible to steal something from the stall. Everything immediately returned to the place. The head was going around that this was hallucinations. But even if so, retreating not in her style. If you can't take food, she will just kill this guy and take everything to herself. Her hand slipped with lightning speed behind her in search of a weapon, but the dagger also disappeared. For several minutes, the young lady spent in unsuccessful attempts to find a knife. But it turned out that Ryusuke Takao already held him in his hand, as if he knew in advance about the intention of the lady. As he did, the girl was completely amazed, because it was her knife and why he needed him. The lady did not understand when this type managed to pull out her weapons so that she did not even notice. The guy calmly noticed that the knife would come in handy for cooking. He has no kitchen accessories in the stall. Arisa grinned, pretending to be quite happy with her, but inside she was wary. How did he know about the knife? This is a clear warning. You should be with him on the alert. She explained that she wears weapons only for self-defense. But Takao did not seem to listen. When the lady asked to return the dagger after cooking, the guy warned her to be careful with this blade. But that was what she needed. With a sharp movement, Eris grabbed a knife, confidently holding him in her hand. In front of her was a simple fool who was easy to deceive and circle around the finger. She darted forward, directing the blade right at the target, but her blow met an invisible barrier. Around Ryusuke, protective energy broke out, not allowing the attack to achieve the goal. The guy only sighed, as if he knew in advance that this would happen. Arisa could not believe her eyes. It turned out that this young merchant has abilities. Arisa Miyasa could not believe her eyes. She did not take an angry look and began to carefully approach. Her body was shrouded in a magic flame, filling the air with heat. But Takao did not even tremble. The next second, he grabbed a pepper can and sent him in the face of the opponent. Burning pain pierced her eyes, and Arisa cried out, blinded by this attack. It was worse than any blow. The girl could not recover from the shock. The young man mocked her, asking mocking questions about acute food, and she only dreamed that these torment would end. The young hero still suggested adding a few seasonings for appetite. The unfortunate Arisa Miyasi asked to stop these bullying. Meanwhile, Ryusuke Takao caught the movement in the dark. There were still people here. He threatened that if they did not come out, their girlfriend would not be greeted. After a moment, the door swung open and several people jumped out. waving with sticks and demanding that Arisa let go, are quickly approaching. The guy was confused. They were only children. The situation became more amazing. The boy and the girl screamed loudly, demanding, "They will free their boss!" Takao, grabbing both by the neck, grinned to attack together on one cowardly tactics. Arisa demanded to leave them alone, let him only torment her. Without thinking twice, the young man released these inexperienced fighters from his hands, who were in wild horror. Having let go of the children, the hero watched them collapse into Arisa, knocking her down. Looking around, he noticed the reserves of provisions. Noodles were visible in cups and cans. However, now the position of the captives turned out to be deplorable. All three were connected by ropes. Arisa spoke. She had never seen this guy before, but for some reason he knew everything. Takao only shrugged. People were always fools and did not notice the obvious. Having examined their reserves, he found that there was almost no food left in an open bank. And Arisa suddenly admitted that she had not eaten and had not drank for 5 days. The stains of blood were visible on the floor, but his new acquaintance did not look wounded. The blood was fresh. Scarlet stains spread over the surface. This meant one thing: someone from this company suffered or even died. The atmosphere around was tense. Turning away, Takao quietly added that he could easily be in their place. The thought of how fragile life made him feel concerned. But the children immediately shouted that they themselves were to blame for everything. They tried to deceive the boss, but in the end they fell into a trap, but accused the guy of cruelty. For a moment, the hero thought, never considered himself a bad person. But Arisa firmly stated that in this world, everyone fights for survival. This applies to everyone. It was difficult to argue with this. He nodded. In general, the lady is definitely right. And then the guy's eyes flashed anger. He grinned coldly and threw that this girl was the same as everyone else. Arisa Miyasa looked at this abnormal horror. A voice trembled when she asked what he was going to do. With a cunning smile, the hero said that he had not eaten fresh meat for a long time, and today he will have a feast. The children screamed. They swept a panic. Bitter tears flowed down their cheeks. This man turned out to be cannibal, which could be worse. Ryusuke Takao watched their despair with a smile. Now these kids will understand what it was to call everyone bad. Arisa Miyasa resolutely stated that he could eat her, but should let her go. They are not to blame. The guys cried out. There should not be such victims. They are ready to share a terrible fate, but will not allow someone alone to suffer for everyone. Ryusuke Takao thoughtfully scratched his head. After such a scene, he really looked like a monster. Meanwhile, the girl burst into tears, shaking in soundless sobs. Despair overwhelmed her. The boy turned to his partner, Renee, and asked how she feels. Arisa Miyasa sharply answered. Their little assistant was injured. Due to the fact that Ryusuke Takao tied her, it is difficult for her to breathe. The guy squinted. Is the girl again going to attack him after he trusted her? But the next moment, Rina coughed so much that her voice broke into wheezing. The young man only grunted. The acting abilities of this girl were impressive. She portrayed the pain too well. Arisa Miyasa desperately stated that this is not a game. If everything continues, the unfortunate will just die. Ryusuke Takao frowned and called the system. He demanded a report on the state of the girl. The conductor approached Renee to check it. It took several languid minutes. Finally, the system uttered the verdict. It has internal bleeding. In this state, it will not last for 3 days. The next moment, and the child coughed again. Judging by her appearance, she felt even worse. Ryusuke Takao looked at his knife bewildered. He was still hesitating. What to do? The next second, the young man approached the captives and destroyed the threads with one movement. Rina immediately collapsed to the ground. She could no longer be in an upright position. A little time passed. Ryusuke Takao examined her. The wound was deep enough. There was really blood on her body, protruding through the bandage. The young man frowned. It looks like a gunshot wound, but who could shoot a child? Arisa Miyasa sternly looked at him and said that it was Karadin. After a moment, the lady spoke. Reina's mother was a regular client of their cafe. That day, they were in the store when an explosion that caused the apocalypse thundered. Arisa Miyasa was always a fan of series about zombies. Noticing the changes after the bite, she quickly slammed the door. Soon the cafe turned into a trap for everyone who was there. At first, people acted together, hoped for salvation. But the food ended, and they became more aggressive. The fierce struggle for supplies began. Karadin took the products that belonged to the mother of Reina. He stated that children do not need as much food as adults, and a small portion is enough for them. The unfortunate mother begged. Her daughter was sick, she needs to eat, she cried. Asked to return food. But the bastard was adamant and said that the one who will die soon, food is not needed. At that moment, Rena's brother, Rakuto, screamed at him and clung his teeth into his hand. The man roared, lifted the boy by the scruff. His voice was full of rage. Since the Mel bite him, he would die very soon. But the next instant, something unexpected happened. Arisa Miyasa rushed forward, knocked the bastard off her feet. She shouted that she would not allow him to steal from the weak. This is below all dignity. But he only grimaced. This is not food. A piece of bread is not able to saturate a man. Arisa Miyasa turned away, throwing over her shoulder so that he went out into the street and find food for himself. She turned again and added with a cold grin that has doubts. A person who is afraid of zombies and torments the weak is not capable of this. The bastard froze. He looked at her in amazement, bewildered, as if he did not expect such a challenge. The rest of the people spoke. This food is really not enough. They could not eat. They even offered to repay when it ended. Arisa Miyasa shook her head. There are no more supermarkets. All that they have is supplies in a cafe. One of the women suddenly asked what was hiding behind the locked room. What was hidden there? Arisa Miyasa thought, then replied, "This is just a locker room. There is no food." But the incredulous woman frowned if there is nothing there. Why the girl so desperately refuses to open her? Maybe she just hides supplies and eats alone and give them crumbs. It is very mean. Her friend intervened and said that it should not be said if not for Arisa. We would have died a long time ago. But others did not agree. If not for her, everyone would have gone earlier and would be safe. Arisa Miyasa angrily looked at them. In front of a lady is just a bunch of idiots. If they think so, they can leave right now. But people have already rebelled, intending to knock out the door and find out what was hiding behind her. They were sure if there really were supplies there, Arisa Miyasa would not just be released. Soon there was a roar. The door collapsed, opening with a deafening crack. Everyone rushed inside, but to their amazement, behind it were only piles of ordinary clothes. The man, incriminating the rest, frowned. Something was wrong. Why there were so many clothes in the cafe? One of those present put forward the version that Arisa was a girl of light behavior and used things to attract men. But unexpectedly, this was interrupted by menacing cries from the outside that it was time to start. The next second, a military truck drove through the wall of dust and debris, destroying everything in its path. A man with a bandage came out of the cabin. He looked around people and said indifferently that they were still alive. The crowd recoiled in horror. No one understood that for a military group appeared so suddenly. The man stated that they were Karadan and suggested that everyone who did not want to die voluntarily give supplies. Frightened people pointed to Arisa Miyasa. Supposedly the girl has hidden food supplies with which she can share. The bandits looked at each other mockingly. This girl was not alone, and to meet a beautiful woman in such conditions, very rare. Arisa rushed to run, but the bastards immediately rushed after her, smiling predatorily. Soon they grabbed several captives. One of the men in a panic shouted that they could do anything with his companion, if only they would spare him. One of the bandits grabbed Arisa by the shoulder, promising that they would spend an unforgettable time with her. The girl squeezed a sharp knife in her hands. She was not going to give up so easily without a fight. Without hesitation, she began to wave her weapons, forcing the enemy to stay at a distance. The bandit froze. The guy clearly did not expect that this girl had a similar weapon. But this did not stop him. He reached for his holster. He had something better than a knife. Suddenly, Reina was in front of Arisa. A little girl obscured her older girlfriend. There was a shot, Reina fluttered. Her body collapsed down, shock froze in her eyes. Rakuto froze in horror. Their mother looked at what was happening with dumb despair. One of the bandits snorted, saying that it was a stupid act. The zombies would hear sounds perfectly and will soon run to the noise. But Karadan was already in rage. He began to shoot at other captives. And then he ordered his people to kill everyone and pick up supplies as quickly as possible. The shots rattled, people fell, emitting dying, desperate cries. Finally, Arisa and 2 children were completely defenseless under the muzzle of a pistol. But then there was an unexpected one. The mother of the children rushed forward, distracting the bandit. She shouted so that Arisa ran with the children. The girl looked at a woman in shock, who was desperately clinging to the enemy. Mother told not to think about her, most importantly, to protect the children and take it to a safe place. The woman asked Arisa to take care of them, defend it and protect from failures and subsequent cruel attacks. Tears covered her eyes. But Arisa understood that she had no choice. Without hesitation, she broke a huge window and jumped out with lightning speed, holding the children tightly. The shelling continued from behind, and a desperate bloody struggle still continued. The last thing they heard was a deafening explosion flooding the entire space. Arisa finished the story. She was entrusted with the children. But Reina's condition worsened. The girl could not restrain her tears. She felt her helpless in this difficult situation. Rina whispered that she should not be afraid. If she dies, she would finally meet her mother. Rakuto cried out, begging her sister not to give up. Arisa also desperately asked her to hold on. The system cried. This child was truly unhappy. Ryusuke Takao frowned. However, his own life was also not easy. But in this world, it is almost impossible to survive with 2 children. Even the fact that they got so far was a miracle. Ryusuke asked the patron saint if there was a way to cure Rina. The answer was disappointing. The possibility exists, but not at the current level. The young man believed that the system was cruel. The patron said that perhaps he was simply trying to gain trust with a new friend, but there should be no illusions. Ryusuke was unhappy. The system immediately calculated his intentions, but this is dishonest. But then the conductor said that there is another chance. The second function of a stall prepared by the owner of the food can have a therapeutic effect. The young man revived. He asked for details. The system explained that the effectiveness depends on the level of the owner. With his current rank, it is risky. But there was no time left. Ryusuke decided to take a chance and try this last opportunity. The ingredients were ready. It only remained to figure out what to make from. The young man thought. Then an unexpected, wonderful idea flickered in his head. The guy began to realize his idea. He broke the egg and kneaded the dough, carefully preparing each ingredient. The last stroke was to salt and add spices to complete this amazing dish. Soon, Ryusuke Takao put a frying pan on the fire. It was heated to the desired temperature, frying all the necessary ingredients. Arisa Miyasa felt an alluring aroma. The smell was so tempting that Rakuto noted. The food looked incredibly appetizing. Meanwhile, Ryusuke proudly introduced his new friends a treat that he prepared. Arisa glanced at the young man in disbelief, trying to understand what he was up to. But he assured her in the dish there is nothing strange. The guy invited Renee to try egg waffle. He loved them since childhood. The girl smiled and thanked her older brother for such a delicious treat. The young lady began to chew, and after a moment felt a strange effect. Rina slowly rose and was surprised to realize that the pain had disappeared, and the wounds no longer bother. Arisa was amazed. Was the girl's temperature really slept, and the wounds dragged on? Really, this happened just because of the use of egg wafers, more like a miracle. She looked at Ryusuke with distrust that he put in this treat. Whether his ability allows him to instantly heal? But the guy did not begin to tell everything. The healing only began. And for the full recovery of waffles, you need to eat regularly. The young man added that this time it is just a service, but later he would have to pay for treatment. Arisa pointed to the shelf with groceries and stated that if the girl is really cured, then Ryusuke could take everything. The young man only shrugged. He already has enough food, but these products are useless to him. Then he slowly raised his finger and pointed to Arisa. All that the guy wants was her. Rakuto exploded from rage. This type decided to take their boss. Just the top of shamelessness. Rina also did not understand, unless it is impossible to heal it without any conditions. Ryusuke looked at them bewildered. Perhaps they simply did not understand him. The guy explained that he wanted to take Arisa to his work, food and protection, in exchange for her work in a stall. Rakuto whispered to his sister that he did not fully understand what the catch is, but the guy's strength looks cool. Arisa, in turn, noted that the guarantee of livelihood is now in handy. She immediately stated that they were ready to work and will fulfill duties together. Ryusuke was slightly disappointed. Perhaps he was mistaken in choosing a man, but Arisa was not going to leave everything without guarantees. In their world, even in such conditions, the contract is required. She posted a document to the young man where all conditions, working time, insurance, 2 days off a week were registered, overtime payment, and a bonus for excellent attendance. Ryusuke frowned. Was they really trying to deceive him? But Arisa calmly added, and the child care manual should also turn on here. Their dispute was interrupted by a sudden noise. An unknown person noticed that it smells very tasty here. There was a ringing of broken glass in the air. The debris flew in different directions. The bandits broke into the room. They looked sternly and clearly knew who they were looking for. One of them smelled his mouth, watering waffles. The smell was too tempting, and he wanted to try. However, Rakuto said that the treat belongs to his sister, and no one has the right to touch him. The stranger met with Ryusuke. For a few moments, they silently looked at each other. Suddenly, the bandit reached for the weapon, deciding to clarify the true intentions of the young man. Ryusuke immediately changed tactics. With a dazzling smile, he stated that he was sincerely apologized. This boy is only a child, and he himself is the owner of a stall and can prepare a new portion. The bandit squinted at his partner in confusion. Is it really so simple? His gaze again darted to the guy. He carefully examined him, trying to solve what he was up to. At that moment, another man stepped forward, asking if everything was in order. Ryusuke made a conclusion to himself. In front of him are ordinary bandits, which means they have a lot of money. And, accordingly, it means that there is a chance to make good money. With a dazzling smile, he suggested looking in the menu and choose a dish to his taste. But the leader frowned. 10 nuclei for waffle. This is unthinkable, a real robbery. Ryusuke calmly explained that in the conditions of this world to get the ingredients, a real test, he made a discount. A warrior squinted. He proposed to provide all the necessary products. The young man easily agreed. The leader warned that if something goes wrong, the guy would pay for it with his life. Ryusuke replied that everything depends on the taste of the customer. Suddenly, a voice rang out next to the bandit. Someone suggested that he was simply not going to pay. It was Arisa. The girl went to the fighter and slightly pulled his sleeve. She affectionately said that her seller was very sorry and apologizes for her behavior. The man turned into displeasure, however. Meeting his gaze with such a beauty, he could not utter a word. Arisa increased the effect, adding that he had amazing muscles, and he is probably very strong. The bandits' accomplices looked at each other in displeasure. Their boss again demonstrated his weakness. As soon as a beautiful girl appeared nearby, his intelligence immediately decreased. Meanwhile, Arisa took advantage of the moment. She said that the preparation would take time and offered to order 10 pieces in advance. With these words, she quietly winked at Ryusuke. Their trick worked perfectly. The guy was delighted. A great idea to hire this smart girl into the team. Without hesitation, Ryusuke Takao began to prepare the necessary dish right by the stove. Soon the fire flashed, and a tempting, rich aroma rose above the pan. The bandits did not hide admiration, absorbing this smell with obvious pleasure. Meanwhile, the dish was almost ready, appetizing in a pan. When the gang took waffle and tried them, they could not tear themselves away. The taste was truly amazing. Ryusuke Takao and his friend Arisa Miyasa, with easy disappointment, watched what was happening. Finally, the boss, having tried the waffle cup, admitted that it was amazing. His fighters felt in this taste something familiar. Even a nostalgic girl sitting nearby loved egg waffles, and this taste reminded them of the past. When the meal came to an end, the leader threw a bag of money Ryusuke Takao, as they agreed. The boss thanked him and added that he would like to try something else, besides the waffle. The young man willingly assured that he could prepare many other delicious dishes. The team immediately began to order. Someone wanted yakitori, others fried chicken, someone grilled squids or sausages. The guys watched this excitement in bewilderment. The bandits parted in earnest, demanding a waffle tofu, pies with beans, from drinks, steak or beer. Finally, boss was tired of this noisy discussion, and he demanded that all dishes be 10 servings. Ryusuke Takao confusedly admitted that they have a problem. There are not enough ingredients, and in this world it is not so simple to find them. The bandit only grunted and assured that they would solve this issue. The young man looked at him warily. This man was too self-confident. Arisa Miyasa whispered to the friend that it seems that if they gathered everything in advance, they would not have to take this risk. Therefore, the guy, grinning, offered to do this on an ongoing basis, a long-term contract with a gang. If they supply the ingredients, he will provide them with food and even make discounts. The guys looked at each other, obviously perplexing. This guy imagined himself as the president or something. The next moment, they erupted with a loud laugh. The leader, grinning, said that he was not engaged in business. Ryusuke Takao and Arisa Miyasa were gloomily realized. Their brilliant plan failed with a bang. At that moment, one of the warriors turned to his partner. Noting that the Kimura did not return, he replied that he had left the landmarks, so they would find the way. Suddenly there was a sharp roar of the motor. A huge car drove right into the building. The guy jumped out of it, panting from the run, and blurted out that there was a terrible trouble. And then he said something from which all those present froze in the shock. The tigers were injured. Several people got out of the car, and some of them barely moved. Ryusuke Takao stared at them. These people looked unusual and too familiar. The boss immediately began to ask the fighters who attacked them and how they were injured. One of the victims, gritting his teeth, said that it was a guy, a seller of snacks, and added that he was some kind of chosen. The leader frowned. It sounded like nonsense. They live in the real world, and not in the comic. There are no elect. Other members of the gang nodded. If such people existed, their boss would be one of them. But the wounded continued to insist. He admitted that he did not believe at first either. But this guy was too strange. He repelled the attacks and brought it to a terrifying state. The leader of the gang glanced at the fellow tribesman, trying to comprehend what this person could reflect the blows. Did he really have supernatural abilities? He only shrugged his shoulders. Never previously encountered something like that before. Arisa Miyase, who carefully listened to the conversation, suddenly realized what was the matter. This power was too strange to be ordinary skill. She remembered their recent duel with Reisuke Takao. Then he also managed to create a protective shield around him, blocking attacks. This could not be a coincidence. The girl looked thoughtfully at her friend. Perhaps he is the one who legends about. Meanwhile, Reisuke Takao felt that the situation was getting out of control. It was time to get out of here until he was exposed. The leader of the gang was furious. Whoever this type was, no one dares to challenge it to people and remain unpunished. Suddenly, the guys realized the truth. This man was incredibly dangerous. His name was Lei Hong. The children trembled in horror and backed away. They clearly did not expect such a turn of events. Arisa Miyase stepped forward. She knew this name. A man in the black cloak of the Thunder Legion. The bandits exchanged glances. The girl told the truth. But judging by her surprise, she did not know how widely known these people were. Le Hong grinned arrogantly. If they ever have problems, let them not be shy about contacting him. He is always happy to help. But at that moment, Rakuto and his sister rushed forward, angrily shouting the accusations. It was his people who wounded the girl and killed their mother. The bandit only shrugged indifferently, as these reckless children generally say. It was unclear to him. The rest of the gang members supported him. Yes, they are bandits, but they never raised their hands on women and children. Arisa Miyase clenched her fists, and without hesitation, rushed into the attack. No one would believe in these words. She demanded that the children be released immediately. Events unfolded at a lightning speed. The girl struck, and the enemy, seized with pain, released the guys out of her hands. Rakuto collapsed to the ground, and soon Rina fell on top of it from above. But the battle was not yet over. The fiery attack was still raging, and Arisa Miyase was furious. The rage completely took possession of it. The girl struck the blow to her enemy, and magical streams of energy were sparkled around them. She fought skillfully, leaving the enemy of the slightest chance to navigate and answer. Her movements were accurate and lightning fast, forcing the enemy only to dodge. The team watched what was happening, fascinatingly following the battle. The girl was clearly skills, but their boss experienced serious problems. He was embarrassed to fight women, could not force himself to attack. Meanwhile, the bandit realized that his team was not even going to intervene. One of the women in the group calmly stated that he should cope himself. Arisa Miyase inflicted another blow, but this time the enemy was able to dodge. The heroes did not even realize that they were watching them. High above them, the mysterious creature was inexorably approaching. Viscid mucus began to drain from the ceiling. Vile, slippery tentacles appeared from the holes. Reisuke Takao watched the battle with genuine interest. Perhaps it was a showdown of long-standing enemies. However, suddenly a hunch dawned on him. Instead of worrying about others, he should think about his own fate. He remembered his recent attempts to defend himself. The first was a fight with a zombie, then the fight with Arisa Miyase, when he managed to repel her attack. Now he had only one chance to defend, and this thought shocked him. Having made the decision, the guy decided not to attract attention and remain safe. But at that moment the bandits recognized him. It was he who was the elected who caused them so many troubles. Le Hong instantly distracted from a fight. Hatred broke out in his eyes. The next second he abruptly grabbed Arisa Miyase by the hand, squeezed it with painful power, and then easily threw the girl to the side, like a ball, passing her a partner. The second bandit caught her and grinned, offering not to make sudden movements and just calm down. Le Hong approached Reisuke Takao. Rage sounded in his voice. He demanded an explanation of how this weakly dared to attack his people and pick up the nuclei. No one had yet allowed himself to treat him. The young man tried to justify himself, claiming that it was a misunderstanding, even if he did something wrong. This did not happen on purpose. The bandits did not believe. They knew that this guy pretends to be weak, which is why he was underestimated. However, his friends did not doubt his strength. His brother and sister shouted that their older friend was not a weakness. He was incredibly strong. Arisa Miyase added that their boss, a real man, unlike those who only make the appearance of power, but is not even able to defeat the girl. Le Hong turned red from rage. These words only posed his anger, and caused a storm of negative emotions. He approached Reisuke Takao and grabbed him by the dark hair with all his might. Concentrating in his hand's powerful energy, he clenched his fist and stated that he was going to test his abilities. The next moment, he hit the floor. The concrete scattered into dust, stone fragments rose around. With one movement, he arranged a real chaos around and showed extraordinary power. The man was shrouded in sparkling energy, and only his dark silhouette was visible in thick dust. He was silent for several moments, looking right in front of him. His eyes were still glowing with anger. Arisa Miyasa thoughtfully noted that this bandit destroyed hard concrete with one blow. It was simply unthinkable. Rakuto and Rina trembled. Their enemy turned out to be much worse than they could have imagined, and even resembled a monster. One of the bandits grinned, the power of superhumans and so monstrous, and their boss was one of the best. Ryusuke Takao retreated. He could not believe what he saw if that blow had come on him, scary to imagine what would happen. Lahong demanded an explanation of what this weakling stared at. Were his confidence gone? He wanted to see his strength. Clutching his fist, the bandit asked if he still believes that he was weaker than a girl. Ryusuke Takao, intending to defend himself, instinctively folded his hands in front of him, the magic vibrations emanating from him threw the enemy several meters. But then the young man was coughed with blood. He himself was shocked by what happened. The bandit could not believe. This guy withstood his blow. Perhaps he was really stronger than an ordinary person. But still, he was far from victory over Lahong, who considered himself great and powerful. Friends watched the struggle in horror. Their brother could no longer continue. The idea that they would never try Waffly again was real frightening. Arisa Miyasa said that you should not despair if this guy perishes. Everything that he has will get to them. Ryusuke Takao became furious. This girl was even more insidious than the bandits. Meanwhile, the enemy laughed. Even the allies turned away from him. Did he still consider himself the elect? It seems that this young man simply reread too many short stories. The next blow threw him right into the wall. The concrete cracked, crumbled under his weight. The young man coughed, trying to recover. Everything was no longer as good as before. A bleeding wound on his body was an alarming signal. Now he just understood to dodge anymore. He would not last like that for a long time. Even with increased power, his blows will not be able to harm the enemy. However, there was another tool with which Ryusuke Takao could try to save his life. The guy realized that the stronger the attack, the more powerful the reflected damage would be. At all costs, he could not miss this chance. Gathering all his strength, he scattered. Liang Hong grinned with contempt. Finally saw a man in his opponent. This guy stopped running away and went on the attack. Without hesitation, Ryusuke Takao rushed towards the enemy, while Liang had already brought a fist to strike. However, at the last moment, the young man applied a tricky trick. Deftly slipped under his feet of the bandit. Lahong froze in a daze. He did not expect such a maneuver and was frankly surprised. Arisa Miyasa with her team were also amazed in the same way. But despite this, the bandits burst out with a loud laugh. They were amused by what was happening. Meanwhile, Ryusuke Takao mentally celebrated a small victory. His trick worked perfectly. The furious Lahong burned with anger. He was ready to take revenge at all costs. Turning around, he rushed to the young man with rage, swearing that he would definitely kill him. At that moment, Rakuto noticed a weapon behind the enemy and decided to take advantage of the situation. The bandit turned sharply, and Arisa Miyasa tried to hide while Rakuto began to fulfill her plan. The boy quickly grabbed the dagger. His movements were so fast and unexpected that the enemy did not manage to do anything. Rakuto threw himself on the attack and, full of rage, shouted that he would take revenge on his mother. Arisa Miyasa and Rina watched what was happening in horror. Their brother risked too much. Meanwhile, one of the bandits was already aiming from a pistol, ready to destroy anyone who dares to encroach on the boss. Ryusuke Takao recalled that these bastards themselves admitted to the murders of women and children, but his plan has already ripened. He pushed the nearest stall with all his might. Ryusuke Takao shouted Rakuto to grab him and thus defend himself. The boy turned into confusion, while Larrick flew in his direction. A powerful explosion rang out. The bullet hit the stall right into the wall. Lahong was beside himself with anger, and promised that Ryusuke Takao would pay his life for this. The young man was numb with fear. He had just had a chance to become a real hero, but he immediately disappeared. Besides, the guy could not stand his own children. The attack was approaching. It seemed that nothing would save the unfortunate Ryusuke Takao. But suddenly there was a new explosion. Chaos reigned around. Fragments and fragments scattered to the sides. When the dust lay down, an amazing girl with proud posture came out. The young lady opened her fiery crimson eyes and looked forward sternly. The bandits turned around and stared with curiosity at the uninvited guest. Amazed at her spectacular appearance, she deftly pushed away from the ground and rushed forward, smoothly dissecting the air. The next moment, her leg crashed into the enemy with force, forcing him to stagger. The villain looked angrily at the attacking one. A dumb question froze in his gaze. The girl proudly, with a challenge, met his gaze, and apparently was ready for the struggle. The bandit rounded his eyes. Will it really have to fight with the representative of the fair sex? Ryusuke Takao exhaled with disappointment. He recognized her. This girl had already delivered him a trouble last time, but she did not stop. Her blows became tougher and more precisely, breaking through the enemy's defense, who hardly kept his feet, trying to find a way to answer the attack. Ultimately, the enemy flew a few meters and crashed into the wall with force, leaving a crack on it, and then collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily and trying to gather forces for a new blow. The lady thoughtfully watched what had happened. The dust rose into the air, catching the battlefield, and only the intense breath of the defeated enemy violated the wary silence. The gang members could not believe his eyes. Their leader was knocked down. Who was this strange heroine? Two bandits suddenly remembered that this is the same girl that they once caught and put in a bag. She is a zombie. The team immediately grabbed the weapon. It was impossible to allow it to bite someone, but getting into it was not so simple. The girl cleverly evaded every bullet. Now everything has become clear. This is not an ordinary zombie. She is a mutant with incredible dexterity. Meanwhile, the girl jumped onto the roof of the stall, remaining in complete combat readiness. The bandit swung his weapon, intending to end this opponent once and for all. Ryusuke Takao was in a panic. Tears came to his eyes. He shouted that the guys could fight as much as they wanted, but they did not dare to touch his bark. Without hesitation, the young man grabbed his outlet and rolled it further. The bandit squeezed his teeth with rage and stared with hatred at the insolent, who did not intervene in his business. He said loudly that in any case he would destroy this woman, after which he aimed from a huge gun. Ryusuke Takao in horror tried to stop what was happening, but his words stuck in his throat, and his eyes remained glass. Meanwhile, the shell inexorably approached the zombie, which still sat on the roof of the stall. The lady calmly watched a flying deadly weapon, evaluating its trajectory, and then instantly calculated possible ways of salvation, without losing a second to unnecessary thought. At the last moment, the girl pushed away from the ground, soared into the air, feeling the muscles tense, and at that moment realized that her only chance of salvation was a desperate maneuver. Then she grabbed the nearest barn tightly, straining every muscle in her hands, feeling the metal under her fingers lends itself slightly, but continuing to hold the grip. She pulled him with all her might, dragging the structure to the side, and the shell carried by, leaving behind him a destructive trace, but not hooking it, although the blow was monstrously close. Ryusuke Takao was relieved to notice that his outlet remained unharmed, but a moment later the wall exploded behind, flying into dust and fragments. The leader of the gang shook with rage, not believing that someone dared to attack him from an ambush. It was unthinkable, because he always kept the situation under control, avoiding mistakes. But before he managed to react, he was pierced by a powerful blow, paralyzing for a moment, and this short confusion became decisive, leaving him a minimum of chances for a return move. The bandit team froze in shock, watching what was happening, not daring to intervene, because what had just happened knocked them out of balance and destroyed confidence in victory. One of them muttered excuses, but the boss did not worry empty words, because now everything that was of meaning was revenge, and nothing could stop his rage at that moment. He was determined to take revenge on all the suffering that he had to endure, for pain, humiliation, and loss that pursued him at every step, pushing him to a fierce reckoning. The team again grabbed the weapon, preparing to turn the impudent into the sieve. Their fingers tensed on the triggers, and the air was filled with the sensation of an imminent, inevitable massacre. Shots rang out. The zombie deftly dodged, predicting every enemy movement. Ryusuke Takao was also in fear, but he was more worried about the state of the stall. Arisa Miyasa could not believe how at such a moment he could think about a retail outlet. The guy stated that this is not just a Laurel, but his brother, and of course, he was worried. At this time, Rakuto, overwhelmed by anger, shouted that he wanted to see the bandits to gobble up the zombies. The girl turned, was surprised to watch what was happening. Bewilderment was read in her gaze. Meanwhile, Ryusuke Takao and the rest rushed, leaving a barley unattended. Zombie grabbed an iron stick, an idea flashed in her head, and, without wasting time, she decided to take this chance, because there was simply no other way to stop the enemy. The young lady circled with a weapon, striking chaotic blows, and then sharply threw him, hoping that the sudden attack would take the enemy by surprise and would not leave him time to defend. The stick rolled over several times in the air and crashed at the enemy with a roar, knocking him down, and the echo of the blow spread through the environs, forcing everyone to freeze in tension. The leader staggered back, not understanding what happened so unexpectedly, and his mind for a moment closed in pain, and fear ran through the body, because he did not expect such a turn of events. His weapons fell out of his hands, starting to shoot madly in different directions, and the bullets ricocheted from the walls, creating chaos, which could become deadly for both enemies and his own. All those present were in a panic. Ryusuke Takao and the guys hid behind the stall. The bandits in a panic rushed away. No one wanted to die from their own weapons. Finally, the machine gun fell, exhausting the ammunition, and its booming fall sounded the last echo of chaos, after which there was silence, frightening more than the sounds of the battle. Frightened people began to peek out of the shelters, carefully evaluating the situation, not knowing whether it was really over, or if it was just a short lull in front of the storm. One of the gang members was confusedly asked where this mysterious zombie disappeared. It was strange that she was nowhere to be seen. Ryusuke Takao and Arisa Miyasa also looked out, trying to understand whether it was really over. But at the same moment, the hero felt someone's presence. Over him, right from the ceiling, hung a zombie. The girl resolutely squeezed her fist. In her eyes, the fighting fervor was still burning. The crowd rushed in horror. Arisa Miyasa desperately shouted that they should not touch children. They are tasteless. The zombie only watched them. These people behaved very strangely. Meanwhile, Ryusuke Takao continued to escape with all his might, not suspecting that they were watching him. Lady Zombie noticed this. She could not allow the situation to get out of control. In the next instant, she rushed forward, intending to catch up with the young man. Ryusuke Takao turned around and turned pale why this insatiable woman still pursues him. But his thoughts were interrupted by a new threat. Terrible tentacles began to descend from the ceiling, ready to grab all living things in their path. The guy rushed forward, but the monster was approaching. Every second measured the remaining time. The girl also saw an approaching threat. Fear froze in her eyes. Without hesitation, she rushed forward, covering Ryusuke Takao from the attack. The monster wrapped her around her tentacles, and the young lady involuntarily cried out. At this moment, Ryusuke Takao first looked at the zombie differently. Contrary to all the fears, she was not the evil as he considered her. She saved him, but the monster ruthlessly threw her to the side. The lady crashed into the wall with force and froze. In less than a fraction of a second, the monster moved forward, again going out of its shelter. Now the mutant stood opposite Ryusuke Takao, and the young man prepared for protection, realizing that one wrong movement could become a fatal for him in this unequal battle. The enemy was huge, his eyes burned with madness, and he was too strong to just hope for good luck, because each attack could break anyone into parts in a second. The leader of the gang realized that the monster was a danger to everyone, because his strength knew the boundaries, and if not to end him immediately, no one would come out of here alive. Without delay, the team opened fire, and soon deafening lines were heard from the machine guns. The monster skillfully reflected bullets. A cloud of dust rose, sparks scattered in different directions, illuminating the chaos of the battle. Ryusuke Takao hurried to the wounded girl. Apparently, she was badly injured. The zombie lay motionless. Her body was covered with blood, and this species filled his soul with bitterness. Arisa Miyasa noticed the oddity in the behavior of this woman. It seemed that she defended Ryusuke Takao, but the guy himself was in doubt. He did not understand what motives moved to her. Suddenly, the zombie moved. She sighed with difficulty and raised her fist weakly. But the next moment, her fingers unclenched, and a small rivet appeared before the surprised guys. Ryusuke Takao froze in amazement. For a moment he was speechless, and looked at the thing that she gave him. These were the same sweets that the guy tried to get rid of her. The young man could not believe. She came only to return this rivet to him. The wounded girl whispered something, but her voice was too weak and barely audible. Rakuto was surprised to realize that this zombie can understand human speech. Ryusuke Takao turned to the system to find out why the zombie behaves as a person. The conductor began the study, and soon issued the result. It is really infected with the virus, but thanks to a special evolution, it partially restored the functions of the brain. It could think and show emotions. Its development corresponded to the level of a 5-year-old child, and now the girl was on the verge of life and death. Arisa Miyasa looked at her with sympathy, realizing that she was painful. Rakuto thought about the zombies are able to feel pain. Rina asked anxiously what would happen to her. The boy recalled that usually zombies died only when breaking through his head. Rina could not stand it and burst into tears. This zombie helped them, fought against the bandits, but now she was doomed. She did not want her to die. Arisa Miyasi said that a woman, apparently, was broken by the spine. Even if she is a zombie, she still could not move. Ryusuke Takao felt despair. Everything that happened because of him. He looked at a weakened zombie, feverishly looking for a way to help, can use waffles. But the system warned that there would be no effect from this effect. It was necessary to complete a special task. The young man resolutely agreed. The patron announced the target, within 24 hours to get a second-level nucleus. Ryusuke Takao thought that the nucleus of the second level is equivalent to 100 ordinary nuclei. It can be obtained from evolving zombies or monsters. The decision came by itself: kill the monster. Meanwhile, the battle with the octopus was still ongoing. Shots were heard from all sides. The fighters attacked him, but the monster was closed by tentacles and repelled all the attacks. One of the warriors anxiously noted that their weapons did not break it. However, his fellow resolutely raised his weapon, preparing to deal with the octopus. There was a powerful shot. The shell rushed right into the monster. The monster's eyes were harsh and impregnable. The monster froze, and for a moment it seemed that the battle would soon be over. But the tense silence only increased the feeling of impending danger hidden behind its inaction. The octopus completely closed his body, and a cloud of dust rose around him, hiding his figure from his eyes. While everyone peered tensely, trying to understand his next step, one of the fighters grinned mildly, confident that the enemy was defeated, but he did not even suspect how mistaken, because this lull only portended an even more destructive attack. The team fled the breath. Have they really coped, and you can celebrate the victory? But suddenly it became clear the octopus is still watching them. A few more moments passed, and the team recognized the terrible truth. The monster squeezed the shell, right in its mouth. The fighters froze in a shock. It was impossible to accept. Their enemy turned out to be much stronger than they expected, and is able to cause tremendous damage. The next moment, the octopus went on the attack. His tentacles rushed directly to the fighters. He released green mucus, which looked ominous and had a strange consistency of the slurry fell directly on people, and it was impossible to avoid it. The fighters were in a shock. They did not understand what was happening. The liquid fell right on them, burning the skin with sticky drops. Green mucus was rapidly hit by the team, and any attempts to evade were unsuccessful. The leader made a decision. It was urgent to retreat into the shelter, because the enemy was too strong, and staying in place meant the faithful death for him and his team. He approached a huge stone, grabbing it on both sides, hoping that a massive obstacle could give them a little time before the enemy brought down his rage. For a few moments, the man moved him, raising dust clubs, straining every muscle to move the heavy block that could become their only hope for salvation. The allies helped him, supporting a massive block, because it was their last chance to escape, and no one was going to retreat, while there was even the slightest opportunity to survive. Finally, the commander grabbed a massive piece of stone in his hands and resolutely looked at the enemy, preparing for the decisive moment, knowing that the outcome of the battle depends on his next step. At this very moment, the tentacles were approaching, and the stone lay heavily in the hands of a man, and his fingers contracted harder when he realized that he had almost no time left. Soon a collision occurred. The monster released a green, sticky slurry, which penetrated deep into the stone surface and corroded it with incredible ease like a fragile ice. The team froze in shock. The concrete slab slowly dissolved, and now they understood that they would not last like that for a long time. However, the commander remained cold-blooded and ordered the allies not to panic. His body tensed, the muscles swollen. He held back the stone and did not let go. At some point, the floor from huge pressure began to collapse under his feet. Suddenly the stone broke, and the next moment of the tentacles were very close, threatening to grab the fighters. One of the guys with horror realized that he was trapped. The shackles braided him from all sides. The tentacles were squeezed so hard that it became difficult for him to breathe. He screamed in a panic, calling for help. The commander froze in confusion, not knowing how to act. But he soon came to his senses and rushed forward with lightning speed, dissected the air, heading for the enemy. La Hong, compared to the monster, seemed tiny, but kept steadily. He challenged the enemy and demanded to release the captive, intact and sound. Red, magical energy broke out around him, filling the air with tension. The captain vowed to tear the monster into pieces and avenge the evil caused. However, when La Hong touched the tentacles, his magic did not work. It was a real shock. He did not understand what was happening, because the enemy was too durable. Soon the monster sharply threw him away, and the fighter began to fall rapidly. But the enemy was not going to stop this fight. The octopus again released the corrupting green mucus from his limbs. La Hong fled his breath, watching how threatening liquid inexorably approaches him. At that moment, something unexpected happened. A new participant appeared on the battlefield. The man in a cloak calmly headed for the monster with the obvious intention of winning. He confidently stepped on the tentacles, not showing fear. It was Ryusuke Takao. His calm was shocked by the team. How did he survive? And how he dared to challenge the monster? Lahong was shocked. It seemed impossible. This young man did not have any superpowers. But then it dawned on him. There is an explanation for everything, and it is also present to this phenomenon. The guy turned sharply. The enemy darted towards him, trying to hook his tentacles. But all the attempts of the monster were in vain. Ryusuke Takao deftly evaded attacks, maintaining composure. The young man jumped resolutely, without getting down from the intended goal. Only a few seconds passed. Ryusuke Takao flew back several meters, deliberately increasing the distance to gather forces. The next moment, a new attack followed, but this time he was ready. The blade in his hand flashed in the air. The hero knew where to aim. He rushed forward, striking at the most vulnerable point of the monster. Everything happened in an instant. A dull crack was heard, and the monster was completely disarmed. After a successful blow, Ryusuke Takao landed smoothly, deftly balancing. But the battle was not yet over. The monster began to swell rapidly from the inside, and after a moment there was a deafening explosion. A bright ray of light pierced the space, blinding everyone around. Cold pieces showered to the ground, once former the tentacles of an octopus. The spectacle was terrible. From the recent monster there was only a lifeless pile of the flesh, bleeding. Ryusuke Takao slowly took off his cloak. His mission was completed. The young man thought about, this clothing turned out to be incredibly useful, especially in such a dangerous battle. Strong fabric withstood the explosion, saving his life. However, he was upset by one thing. It is unlikely that he would be able to get the same cloak again. The awards for completed tasks were randomly selected, and the next time he could get something completely different. In any case, the main goal was achieved, and everything went successfully. The guy went to the remains of the monster, lowered his hand into the vile flesh, and after a moment he pulled out a second-level nucleus. The find delighted him. The system congratulated the hero on the completion of the task and presented the award. The young man received not only the core, but also the healing candy, as well as the cooking guide. Ryusuke froze in surprise. In front of him was a real culinary book. The conductor explained that the mutated creatures and plants can be eaten if you get rid of the parts infected with the virus. The book describes their structure and properties. Now it had an indispensable leadership for survival. The guy smiled smugly. This is an excellent acquisition. It will definitely come in handy to him. The next step was to heal the wounded girl and bring her to life. Ryusuke Takao sank down next to the zombie that had lost consciousness and brought a sparkling candy to her mouth. The girl took her with weak lips and began to chew, without opening her eyes and practically not moving. But after a moment, her eyes opened sharply, and she looked right in front of her. The young lady even had enough strength to get up. She looked satisfied and very lively. Rina joyfully exclaimed that the zombie was alive and now in order. Arisa Miyasa looked at his friend with fear. He did alone coped with the mutated octopus. A minute ago, Ryusuke Takao looked frightened, and now it seemed a completely different person. Meanwhile, the girl opened her mouth with a zombie, clearly intending to say something. However, the young hero was not in the mood for such games and said that she lagged behind him. Arisa Miyasi, who carefully watched everything that was happening, now had no doubt this guy hides his strength. Ryusuke Takao had no choice but to throw a candy on the go, so that the persistent zombie was distracted. Rina laughed merrily. This scene clearly amused her. Despite the secrets of the young man, Arisa Miyasa noted to herself that he had a good heart and he can be trusted. Rakuto was still afraid of an unfamiliar zombie and warned her sister so that she would not approach her. The guy said that even if she looks harmless, he could actually bite accidentally. The girl looked towards the guys. Apparently, she understood what was about. Then the zombie approached her brother with her sister and carefully looked into their eyes. The expression of her face was kind. With all her appearance, she showed that she did not want them to be evil. Rina watched this unusual lady with a slight numbness, a little fearing her. But the next moment, all doubts were scattered. The zombie jokingly leaned toward her and began to lick her tongue. When Rakuto approached, a stressed pause hung. The boy still did not trust this creature. Therefore, he desperately rushed to run and asked the zombie would not approach him. Rina laughed out loud. She noticed how her brother turned thickly with embarrassment. Meanwhile, Lahong turned to Ryusuke Takao. He was disturbed by some questions. The commander said that if the guy was able to cure even the zombies, he can probably heal his brothers. Men lay on the ground covered with terrible wounds, howling with pain and despair. One of them was completely charred. He could not even move. His skin got down, exposing the bones, and his breath was getting weaker. He could no longer be saved without immediate help. Ryosuke Takao carefully approached the fighter, examining his terrible wounds. The view was terrifying. Charred flesh, bare bones, unbearable pain in his empty, full despair of his eyes. It seems that these men had no hope. Their bodies were wounded, the strength at the end, and without help they would probably die. The rest only silently watched their torment. The commander ordered Ryosuke Takao to cure the fighters, to give them a chance to survive. Despite serious injuries, they could come in handy. Their lives depended on the magic that he owned. The young man turned sharply, and with a challenge asked whether this order was really in the voice of Lei Hong. Hardness was heard, which left no room for doubts. He was not used to repeating twice. Therefore, Ryosuke Takao resolutely rose, saying that he did not see the point of helping these people. He did not like that he was forced to do something against his will. He hated orders. The man calmly replied that he would pay for his help. He offered any number of nuclei, as much as he needed. The young man arranged it, and he was about to begin treatment. But suddenly a thin female hand fell on his shoulder. He froze in surprise, feeling a chill on his back. Arisa Miyasa stood nearby. Her face was gloomy, and her eyes were icy. The girl abruptly pushed him away and stated that no matter how many nuclei were offered, he would not treat these people. Her voice sounded firmly, without hesitation. The decision was final. The rest of the guys supported her. They were not going to spend magic on these villains. These people did not deserve help. Their lives did not cost even 1 core, not to mention a lot. Leong remained calm. He firmly said that they were not killers. They have principles, and they never touch those who cannot fight back. Their honor meant a lot for them. Then, lowering his eyes, he said that if one of his people killed their mother, then perhaps she was a bad person. There was not a drop of doubt in his voice. These words shocked the children. They could not believe that their mother could be bad. She was kind and caring. In their eyes, this team remained only brutal killers. Arisa Miyasa said that the leader says it on purpose to be cured, and then kill them. But unexpectedly, Ryosuke Takao intervened in the conversation. The young man said that this man was telling the truth. These words plunged Arisa and 2 children into a real shock, from where a friend found out about it. Ryosuke Takao calmly repeated his words and took out a small piece of fabric. It seems that he fell out of the rakuto pocket. The boy admitted that he kept this symbol of the gang that attacked them to find his enemies. Cruel bandits wore the same bandages, and Rakuto kept one of them in his pocket. Ryosuke Takao noted that the dagger, which he took, belonged to another group. Although the emblems are similar, in general they are very different from each other. These differences are noticeable, if you look closely. The dagger depicts a golden symbol with a green insert, and on the bandage, a stylish silver. Arisa Miyase in surprise took the weapon in her hands. Indeed, if you look closely, you can see the difference. One emblem was more thoughtful, while the second looked like a children's drawing. Lahong with anger noted that it is not worth talking about their symbol. If the children do not understand anything, it would be better for them to be silent at all. Ryosuke Takao calmly said that he had already encountered gangs covered by other people's emblems. Perhaps the group that the guys attacked was a fake. Friends looked at each other in horror, realizing that what was said could be true. The leader only grinned. It is not surprising that they were attacked with such hatred. Suddenly they got to the children. They were mistaken. It was not a thunderous legion at all. But if so, then to whom to take revenge now? However, Arisa Miyasa intervened in the conversation. Revenge is not the main thing. Their mother would most like them to just live happily. Brother and sister looked at each other, but did not dare to ask the question that tormented them. Meanwhile, a bandit, who had already bandaged his hand, irritatedly abandoned that these bastards had stained their reputation when they met again. They would not greet them, but suddenly a sharp pain pierced his body, and he knelt down weakly. The captain noticed this, barely having time to react. His team was still too weakened and seriously injured. The man appealed to prudence, since Ryosuke Takao recognized the truth, could help. The guy calmly agreed but set the price, 10 nuclei per person. The leader, without hesitation, threw a bag of money. The contract was concluded. Ryosuke Takao headed for the stall, preparing to prepare everything necessary, but suddenly noticed the eggs were broken. The young man looked at the products with annoyance. He clearly did not expect this. The guy shut the door sharply. This simply could not happen. And yet this happened, intentionally smoothing the situation. He calmly stated that he had a small problem, and he was ready to return the nuclei. But the commander's eyes flashed with anger. This guy laughs at him and mock him. Ryosuke Takao laughed, not ceasing to behave deliberately carelessly. And then, flooding with a hysterical laugh, He stated that it was impossible to prepare egg waffles without eggs. But suddenly, in the head of Ryusuke Takao came the idea to see a hint in the book that I received recently. The fact that the young hero saw there plunged him into shock. It was just incredible. Without hiding joy, the guy realized that he had found a suitable recipe for which there were all the necessary ingredients. In his head, the thought arose instantly how this can be realized. The joy was immense. But the next moment, Ryusuke Takao got serious. He needed an octopus. Oil and a little seasoning, probably. This can be cooked quite quickly. The guy dawned on the hunch. Now he realized what to do to cure all the wounded people. It was necessary to collect all pieces of a cut octopus and remove all the extra. Cut the outer shell in suction cups, leaving only pure meat. The young hero immediately set to work. In addition, it was necessary to marinate the pieces, adding spices to get rid of a characteristic smell. Then he kneaded the liquid dough, added the meat, and mixed everything well. The consistency turned out exactly what it was supposed to be. The next step, the guy poured the mixture in forms. The dough was readily poured. It remained to make a small hole, thoroughly fry on one side, and then turn over to the other. After that, Ryusuke Takao carefully flooded everything with tomato and salad sauce to enhance the taste. The final stroke was the coating with chopped potato chips. Thus, such were completely ready for use and could even benefit health. The guy informed the victims of the soldiers that this food would help them heal and restore strength. However, the fighters were in a panic. To use the mutated octopus for cooking, this young man clearly wants them to quickly go to the next world. The captain looked doubtfully at the dish. Is it really possible to eat? The guy confidently stated that he did not care whether they would be it or not. Ryusuke Takao had already received his fee and was about to leave. The fighter thought, the smell was really amazing, and the look quite appetizing. Having weighed everything, he decided to try, even if he died. Then at least he will finally enjoy the taste. He chewed a piece, and the next second he felt something incredible. The man trembled. His face under the mask probably reflected amazement. It was difficult to understand what influence this dish had on him. The soldier suddenly began to cough heartily. Perhaps something went not according to plan. His friends watched what was happening in horror. His brother clearly became worse after he tried this food. The leader harshly stated that if something happens to his friend, Ryusuke Takao would not leave so simply. However, when a man took a step forward, a zombie suddenly appeared between them, blocking a young man. The commander was amazed that it was still why this girl again intervenes in their conversation. Meanwhile, the soldier began to recover. He took a deep breath several times and seemed to have found his strength again. After that, the man got up and noticed that the sensation was just amazing. The crust was incredibly soft, like clouds, enveloping the whole body and immersing in a state of weightlessness. The meat was delicate, like a dance on the tip of the tongue, conveying an unforgettable taste. This octopus was amazing, not like any dish that had ever had to try. It was like an endless ocean, whose waves rose, lifting the soul and taking away into unknown depths. The warrior repeated again that it was great, but he lacked words to convey the sensations. His friends looked at each other incredulously. Did he really speak seriously, and it is really so tasty? The next moment, a commotion began. Everyone sought to try a treat, interrupting each other. The soldiers could not believe. But, feeling the taste, they realized that he was really unusual, and Hu was no exception. He also had to try, and suddenly he felt a strong surge of energy. The man cheerfully chewed, still doubting whether this dish was so special. But the next moment, all his doubts scattered, and he breathed sharply. His chest expanded, as if he first managed to take a truly deep breath. Having examined himself, he was surprised to realize that his wounds were healed, disappearing in front of his eyes. Moreover, even old scars, reminders of the past, began to disappear, as if they had never existed. It was incredible. The effect of the octopus was truly wonderful. Ryusuke Takao only grinned, admitting that he added some ingredients to the dish, but let it remain his branded secret. Nevertheless, deep down, an alarming thought did not leave him. He could make a mistake. His current forces were not enough to fight with those who had abilities. If they learn about the system, they will begin to use it. I would not want his worst fears to become a reality. When the guy was called, he froze in fear for a moment. Was he really opened? But the commander only said that he did not expect such a magnificent dish from him. Fortunately, the young man managed to fool them. Smerelev, Ryusuke Takao recalled that he had recently offered cooperation. The man restrainedly replied that he would think about it. The team met this decision by dissatisfaction, demanding that the boss does not listen to the young man, because it was precisely because of him that they were injured. he was responsible for everything that happened. However, Takao himself calmly recalled that they did not honestly with him when they were going to rob him. The bandits looked at each other, shrugging their shoulders. They are robbers by nature. Seeing a man with so many food, they could not but rob him. In the end, it was their craft, and no one canceled professional ethics. The commander, suppressing the laugh, admitted that it was said it was quite accurately, but still the young man did not consider these people fundamental. They claimed that they did not touch women and children, but at the same time, they did not spare the zombies. If she turned, this did not change the essence. There was still a girl in front of them. So why was it to stuff her in a bag? After a short silence, the guys admitted that she was just too good, and they decided to present her to the boss. Ryusuke Takao, with a mockery, noticed that someone has a very specific taste here. Arisa Miyasa was in horror. These bastards did not even leave the zombie alone. In the meantime, Rakuto told his sister so that she would not listen and would not delve into this dirty conversation. The team stared at his boss with surprise. Would he really agree to this? The man in a panic rounded his eyes, insisting that they would not speak stupid things. He has nothing to do with it. And after that, he demanded that friends explain what was happening. Having a look, one of the fighters admitted that everything was only the initiative of the team. The boss began to be very nervous in the presence of women, and they wanted to find a pretty zombie for him so that he could overcome his fear. They did this exclusively out of better motives, so it was not worth angry at them. But the commander was furious, as such an idea could have occurred to them at all. Did they really consider him a pervert? Suddenly there was a signal. The system said that the time of completion of the assignment was expired. It was necessary to find an assistant seller and complete the task. Ryusuke Takao was surprised. Was it really 24 hours? But this was a logical inconsistency. He already had an assistant, so why the task was not considered completed? The conductor explained that both parties should sign a contract for the test, and the new employee is obliged to wear the appropriate form. It was unexpected. The uniform of the saleswoman could be very different. In the imagination of the young man, the image of Arisa Miyasa immediately arose in several possible outfits. One option looked charming, while the other is stylish, and the third was so refined that he overshadowed everyone around his beauty. Ryusuke Takao smiled dreamily. It looked just perfect. But the system sharply reminded him that they still did not have such a uniform. You will have to be content with what is. With obvious chagrin, he picked up a standard set of clothes. It was the most ordinary outfit, and yet what kind of disappointment it was. Ryusuke Takao sighed and said that he had forgotten to mention an important detail. Employees need a special form. Rakuto looked at him doubtfully. Would he really have to wear her? The young man only shrugged. Such rules. They all have to change to begin duties. Arisa Miyasa began to take off her old dress. Her gaze remained calm. However, Ryusuke Takao angrily shouted at her friend and ordered her to go to another room. But the fighters, enthusiastically observing her, only dismissed, asking not to pay attention to them. Arisa Miyasa noticed that her shape was too small. A larger size was needed. At that moment, the commander turned pale, staggered and crumbled in faint from the shock. Ryusuke Takao roared at his comrades. Could they really not even close his eyes for decency? However, unexpectedly, something rounded with a whistle crashed into his head. For a few moments, the young man froze, trying to realize what had just happened. Then, raising his head, he froze in a dumb horror. Drudge Queen was in his hand. A fairly unexpected turn of events. And when Ryusuke Takao looked at his girlfriend, he was speechless for a few moments. Before him stood a completely different person, it turns out. Arisa Miyasa looked completely different. Her body was muscular, like a guy. The stranger smiled silently for several moments, watching their reaction. Ryusuke Takao staggered, his eyes widened with horror. Cannot be. Arisa Miyasa, the very cute girl he met, turned out to be an ordinary guy. The stranger calmly noticed that he had never said that he was a girlfriend. It was just strange that everyone was so surprised. The bandits suggested that he specially wore such outfits to pretend to be weak and lure enemies. A very smart move. But the truth was something else. He just really liked to dress like that. The guys remembered that the boss loved beautiful dresses. He had many of them, but unfortunately, he could never put them on. This was called cross-dressing. Ryusuke Takao bitterly cried. His dreams of an excellent assistant in a seductive uniform collapsed irrevocably. At this time, the system announced the start of the return reference. It was urgent to complete the task, and finally determine the choice of an employee. The upset guy admitted that he has no other way out. He must do it. The guy picked up a contract in which it was necessary to fill out all the necessary data. The information concerned the period of work, duties, working days, and so on. With a heavy heart, he slowly brought his name on soft paper. At that moment, the girl, who carefully watched his actions, approached the young man. Ryusuke Takao, looking at her bewilderedly, handed the document to the man who was once called Arisa Miyasa. The guy with a grin noticed the expression on the face of Ryusuke Takao, if not for food, who would like to help him at all. However, the young man only sighed heavily, thanks to the system. Others have harems, super sizes, and he has a disguised guy and a couple of children. The hero thought that nothing could be worse. Soon the contract would be signed. But suddenly something strange happened at the moment when the new employee was about to sign. The swift silhouette cut through the air and very quickly slipped between them. Zombies with lightning speed slipping between them grabbed the contract, holding it in his teeth. For a few moments, Ryusuke Takao was speechless. He clearly did not expect such a turn. Meanwhile, the zombie began to chew a sheet of paper, intending to swallow it. The young man desperately rushed forward, trying to tear out the document from her mouth. When he finally pulled out a surviving contract, he noticed that the employee's signature was already standing, but someone else put her with his lips. At that moment around the zombie, a magic whirlwind spun. Her body swept aglow. Her eyes shone with bright light, and the air was filled with a magic pollen. When the radiance subsided, a transformed girl appeared before the heroes. Ryusuke Takao silently looked at her, not believing his eyes. And yet, no matter how beautiful the employee was, the young man did not want to work with a zombie. Some time passed, and the company of friends went to a large, spacious hall. Arisa Miyasa was beside herself. Instead of choosing a beauty like him, Ryusuke Takao took some kind of zombie as assistance. But given the amount of compensation, it was pointless to argue. Ultimately, everyone was satisfied. Ryusuke Takao reasonably remarked that there would be no compensation without a contract. And this is just extortion of money. However, there was no point in arguing for a long time. This place was no longer suitable for life. He asked his friends what their plans they had. Arisa Miyasa replied that he had already spoken to Lei Hong. They were ready to take them with them. The commander promised to teach Rakuto to fight and shoot so that he could defend his sister. Ryusuke Takao admitted that it sounds good. Despite the fact that they are bandits, the guys will really be safe under their protection. Suddenly, the girl called Ryusuke Takao and clearly wanted to convey something to her senior friend. It fell out of her sister's clothes when she changed clothes. Apparently, these were zombies. There was a photo as well as the name Bai Feifai. Nevertheless, this girl had documents. It was a pass similar to Baigik from her work, which means that the young lady is so-called. Liu Hong, meanwhile, turned to Ryusuke Takao and said that this was their current base. If the guy has problems, then he could safely come. This place was called the Shinshin Prison. Just incredible how gloomy and suspicious it was. It was difficult to even imagine that the base of these people would be in a similar place. The leader said that he did not see anything bad in prison, high walls and reliable protection. This is the safest that it could be. Arisa Miyasa was enthusiastically praised by Brother Lioi, who was really very smart and asked for a separate room for himself. But the commander sharply ordered that the newly made brothers stayed away from him and finally put on men's clothes. Soon everyone plunged into the car. Ryusuke Takao thoughtfully watched it drove away. The guys waved goodbye and promised that they would miss the older brother. Other friends admonished the baby Takao, advising not to give a zombie to eat themselves and not forget to look at them. The young man waved goodbye to them and mentally wished him a good and calm trip. After that, the hero looked at the documents of his new employee. She was very beautiful. Although Ryusuke Takao did not know what was waiting for him in the future, he should have been ready for everything. Turning around, the young man turned to a friend to take care of him well. But the next moment, the guy with chagrin realized that Bai Feifai had already disappeared from sight. The young lady did not miss the opportunity to try everything that was behind the stall. Ryusuke Takao shouted exhaustingly that it was not food. But despite all the hero's attempts to protect his property, the zombie did not intend to retreat. The guy desperately tried to drag her, but no persuasion helped. Bai Feifai grabbed the jaw by the larak and held onto a dead grip. Ryusuke Takao began to be angry. It was simply unthinkable. His assistant behaved very recklessly. In the end, the young man unhooked the zombie directly with a certain element of the stall. This led to the fact that the whole structure fell apart with a roar. A cloud of dust rose upward. This was a real disaster. The young man could not believe that his outlet was destroyed. Nevertheless, it remained a mystery how this lady was able to break Larak, because he was very durable. The system said that she would try to do everything possible to start looking for information. A few minutes passed. The conductor said that the search was successfully completed. According to the information received, the recovery function exists, but it is used only for external influences. Since Bai Feifei is an employee, its actions are not considered external influence. The young man boiled with anger. Was it really impossible to notify about this in advance? If Resuke Takao knew this before, he would keep her away from the stall. Now it was a mystery how to fix the structure, because it was completely destroyed. The system said that you should not worry, because the guy has only 100 points left until the next improvement. As soon as he completes the task, everything will automatically restore. Within 24 hours, it is necessary to replenish food supplies and collect 250 kilograms of meat suitable for use. The award will be issued immediately after the completion of the task. Resuke Takao thought tightly. In the apocalypse, it is difficult to find even a couple of kilograms of meat, where to get as much as 50. Having thought a little, the young man came to the conclusion that there was a small poultry farm nearby. Perhaps the answer was in the book. It is necessary to study everything properly in order to understand. On one of the pages, there was a description of the chicken of mutants. They possessed relatively low combat power among infected animals. After removing the infected units, the meat can be used for cooking. The young man looked thoughtfully at the chicken coop. There were several representatives of this breed. The bird opened the beak and began to purr heartily. At that moment, her eyes flashed wild light. The guy hid behind the stone. These chicken mutants, in addition to his large sizes, were not very different from the usual ones. It should be easy to cope with them. The only problem was that there were too many this living creatures. It is necessary to find a way to divide them. Bai Feifei furtively looked at her friend. They exchanged glances. And at that moment, Resuke Takao had a brilliant idea. He will be a bait and lure them to the zombie. And the next step by Bai Feifei will quickly and very impressively cope with these chicken. The young man voiced his plan and asked the zombie whether she understands everything. The girl nodded in response. Resuke Takao resolutely jumped into the chicken coop, attracting attention. The chicken stared at him in bewilderment. At this time, Bai Feifei prepared for the attack. Her eyes sparkled with growing excitement. And the next moment, the young lady quickly rushed forward, clutching her weapons in her hands. Resuke Takao in horror realized that everything got out of control. But this is not a game. However, the girl did not listen to him anymore. She jumped from side to side, and the chicken watched her movements with confusion. Finally, the zombie was on the beam, cleverly jumped on the board and watched everything from a height. Resuke Takao, as well as the chicken, near which he was, were very surprised and puzzled. The young man clasped his teeth in fear. He was alone with this horror. Centimeters shared them, and it was unclear what to expect from them. The guy did not find another way out, except to flee and try to survive. The mutant continuously caught up with him. The chicken beak was very sharp. She easily broke the stone. Resuke Takao could not understand what was wrong here, because in fact this bird should be very weak. But her claws were so sharp that very soon the young man could turn into a sieve from one blow. The enemy was inexorably approaching. The heart of Resuke clogged at a frantic speed. The guy asked for help from the zombie. Suddenly, the hero discovered that there was nowhere to run further. A huge fence towered ahead. Despite this, Resuke continued to rush forward with all the strength that he could only collect. When the young man stopped, he joyfully looked right in front of him. It was a way out. Under the lattice fence, a hole was dug, through which it was possible to get out. Without thinking twice, the hero did so, began to crawl under the fence and cleverly climbed into this recess. Finally, the barrier was defeated. Resuke jumped out and was again in another pit. At this point, terrible monsters began to approach faster. Their eyes burned with wildfire. The young man watched the birds, but they were not able to leave this territory. And Crazy Chicken jumped along the fence, but could not get their victim. The guy took a breath. Fortunately, there was a hole here. Otherwise, he would not have survived and would be killed. Suddenly, Resuke noticed that his hand touched something mucus. A moment later, the hero realized that there were many huge shells next to him. This discovery plunged him into a complete shock. Terrible thoughts came into his head. The hero looked in confusion in front of him, and around him lay many huge shells. Suddenly, some rustle was heard behind his back. Resuke was afraid to make a sharp movement, and only furtively looked there. Meanwhile, right next to him stood a monster, mutating the chicken, which was clearly unhappy with this uninvited guest. Without thinking twice, the bird rushed forward, intending to teach this type. Resuke barely managed to eliminate, not understanding where this impudent chicken came from. Suddenly he guessed that he had fallen into a bird hole. He was clearly not lucky for recently. Now the guy was unarmed and could not use it to defend himself from the attack. It only remained to flee, but the forces left the young hero, and the chicken, meanwhile, was approaching. Finally, the monster pecked the guy with all his might. He screamed in pain and despair. But the bird did not stop there. It seems that she wanted to completely teach him. This situation was terrible. The young man could not believe that something like that really was happening to him. Probably the eggshell in which he fell belonged to this chicken. Due to his fall, the guy inadvertently broke her, and probably the hen is now taking revenge on him. And by this time, the mutant was approaching. Her sharp beak was ready to attack. But Resuke Takao suddenly felt an echo of anger. This chicken will still pay. Having pulled away from the blow, the young man decided that he would not give up so simply. Be that as it may, the guy made a clever trick in the air and clung to his feet in the monster's neck. Risuke clamped his legs stronger and decided that now he would personally strangle the enemy. The next moment, the young man began to target this huge chicken purposefully. Risuke was pleased with the plan that he invented and believed that this was a very good decision. At some point, the chicken closed her eyes and lowered her head, apparently finally suffocating. But unexpectedly, the monster opened his eyes. Apparently, she still did not completely die. The young man was surprised. Was the chicken still alive, while he was already a little relaxed? This minute confusion was enough for the chicken to wave her head sharply and threw Resuke into the air. The guy landed on the ground, directly on the bird, and stared puzzled in front of him. Risuke in horror asked for help, while a stupid monster tried to discover him. The chicken stared in surprise in different directions, but could not understand what happened. With all his might, the hero grabbed the feathers so as not to finally fall down. The guy asked someone to kill this chicken, but in response, of course, silence followed. Meanwhile, actions took place in a forest, densely overgrown with green trees. A military car rode along the way, moving not too fast around this territory. There was a voice from the window, which said that the first, second, and third teams arrived at the base, and the question was whether everything was in order. One of the military spoke by the radio, the commander transferring data to his comrades. He added that if everything goes smoothly, they will arrive in local settlements later. The guy also said that he heard the two cars returned empty-handed, and that now their whole team would envy them. A gray-haired man with a mustache said that their commander, too careful, he was afraid to go far. The second noticed that the Captain Ho was very smart and immediately guessed where food supplies were stored in the basement. The soldiers exchanged glances, regretting noting that all the inhabitants of the village ultimately turned into a zombie. And if they returned safely, it is worth noting this. The car moved further, and ahead was already ahead. The wheel almost ran into a sharp needle. Only a few millimeters remained. Suddenly, the guy ordered to stop the car. Something was alerted. The fighters went out and began to look around with surprise, trying to understand what happened. Meanwhile, the wheel was completely blown away. After a collision with a needle, the man approached and saw the problem, immediately informing his team about this. The fighter, looking around, turned to the captain, who looked tense. He noted that he had not previously encountered zombies on this road, despite frequent driveways. Captain Ho said it was better to play it safe than regret. The number of mutants is growing every day, especially in open areas. The guy ordered his partner to Min and Gai Zhen to quickly change the wheel and to stand on guard. The fighters carefully examined the territory, armed and ready for action. The rest of the fighters sought to replace the wheel as quickly as possible. One of them turned to a comrade, wondering where the zombies could appear on this road, but in any case they would quickly cope with them. However, the senior comrade quickly brought his subordinates to his senses, reminding them that it was not worth chatting nonsense, but it is better to focus on doing his work. The guys apologized to Uncle Joe and admitted that they were newcomers who had just joined the team. The man thoughtfully exhaled smoke and said that he understood everything, but it was necessary to understand a few important points. Among all groups, their team is the most successful, with less losses. But this is not an accident. All this thanks to the commander of Ho, who has vast experience and always acts with caution. Beginners, as a rule, become cannon fodder. But they are alive in this team because they value caution here. The guys noted that the wisdom of Captain Ho is really impressive, and they were lucky that they would learn a lot. One of the fighters said that he needed to leave for need and leave for a short while. Uncle Joe said in displeasure to hurry up, because he forces the whole team to wait. Meanwhile, the captain of the Ho listened with warily. A strange sound was heard in the distance. When he turned to the group, everyone replied that they did not hear anything. The young man, deciding to check, made his way through the bushes, trying not to attract excess attention. Meanwhile, the newcomer, with a sigh of relief, was glad that he had finally coped with his need. He did not notice how something unusual slipped out of the bushes and began to watch him. The guy looked around but could not find anything unusual. Everything around was quiet and calm. The guy calmly thought that perhaps it just seemed to him. And even after a split second, I did not understand that he was mistaken, and the creature was already descending from the tree, and now it was in dangerous proximity. The newcomer was dumbfounded. He raised his head and looked at the monster in horror, which now stood right in front of him. The monster opened its terrible mouth, clearly intending to eat this lost guy. Everything happened with lightning speed. A shot was heard, and green liquid flowed from the monster's head. The beginner was still in a daze, was in complete shock. Captain Ho sharply ordered to return to the car, because it was extremely dangerous to stay in the forest alone. The guy turned to his team and asked if the threat was eliminated. Uncle Joe replied that everything was in order, and the car was ready to move. The captain of the one in displeasure asked where the mutated snake came from, and the newcomer hastened to apologize for his carelessness. The captain said that it was urgent to get out of here until the snake returned. It is better not to risk it. The team got into the car, and the driver started the motor to leave as soon as possible. The car raced away, gaining speed, trying to hide from this dangerous place. And the terrible mutated monster looked after them. His eyes burned with wild fire. The snake was not going to retreat. She resolutely went after the leaving car, intending to catch up with him. However, the mutated reptile showed ingenuity, and crawling right under the wheels, continued the persecution. The snake sharply raised her head and threw the car into the air with force. The crew in a panic screamed when the car began to go down rapidly. However, the snake did not allow the car to go down, enveloping it with its body. The team was trapped, losing balance along the cabin along with boxes and provisions. Captain Ho has dawned on an alarming thought. The monster is going to crush the car. It was necessary to act quickly, but the door jammed, and the fighters could not get out. Ho, not bewildered, said that he would cover them, and Uncle Joe should break the glass as soon as possible. The man noticed that the fuel tank flows, and if you shoot, there will be an explosion. The soldiers plunged into a panic state. They could die here, without a single chance of salvation. Meanwhile, the mutated chicken raced along the road, which still did not leave hope to catch Ryusuke Takao. The soldiers in a daze noticed an approaching creature that could be both a threat and salvation. The next moment, the chicken climbed into the air and spread her wings. It looked very impressive. The newcomer panicked, and it seemed to him that he would really die, because he had already seen an angel. Uncle Joe did not understand what was being discussed, and said that one should not carry nonsense. This is just a huge chicken. It was not clear what this creation was doing here and where it came from, but suddenly Ho guessed that it was probably that he understood why this happened. On the back of the bird was a man who was riding on a mutated chicken. Ryusuke Takao, meanwhile, was worried about fear. Tears of despair flowed from his eyes. The hero could not understand why she did not stop. The soldiers looked at what was happening in surprise, not understanding who this guy is and how he could control the mutated animal. Ha said that this is very unlikely. An ordinary person cannot cope with such a task. If this chicken carries it, then she just drags him on her back, while this desperate guy screams with fear. The snake was instantly alerted. It was attracted by a new goal, which was definitely appetizing. The reptile stared at the bird, but the chicken did not give up and resolutely went forward. Suddenly, she turned her head and found Ryusuke Takao on her back. The bird opened the beak to swallow the impudent. The guy froze with horror, not understanding why she could not leave him alone. Does the chicken really think that he can kill her with his bare hands? Nevertheless, the hero did not want to die and grabbed the bird's neck, trying to get up. The guy was determined to show his abilities and survive in this situation. Ryusuke Takao's hands tied with tension, but he clamped them with all the strength that he was capable of. At that moment, he approached the bones of the chicken and chopped off her neck in one movement. Meanwhile, the snake has already opened its terrible mouth, intending to eat everyone who gets. The chicken was carried into the air, and the snake, rapidly approaching, was preparing to grab her victim. Everything happened very quickly, and at that moment when the snake flew up and bit the chicken, it all ended. The young man, exhausted, took a breath, but did not understand why he was still in the air. Ryusuke Takao thought that he was probably getting stuck on a pillar, and he needed to go down. Now it was possible not to worry and leisurely go to the Earth's surface. Having made a rapid jump down, the young man deftly overcame a long distance. But suddenly the hero realized that the pillar was moving, which was very strange. The guy barely retained his balance when he noticed that it was not just a pillar, but some kind of strange creature. The texture of this subject is too suspicious to the touch, and the movement became more and more intense. At that moment, the snake looked down. She kept the chicken in her teeth, but now her attention was focused on Ryusuke Takao. Ryusuke Takao was horrified why he was so unlucky. As soon as he managed to deal with the chicken, The new threat hung over him. The mutated snake. The reptile, meanwhile, completely swallowed its victim. For a few moments, silence came inside her. Then the chicken, sliding along the walls of the stomach, stretched it out from the inside. Taking advantage of the moment, the hero decided to quietly disappear from sight. But he realized his great disappointment that this was impossible. The young man was already noticed. The snake with anger stared at the guy. Ryusuke Takao froze in a complete shock. The guy looked at his enemy, a huge snake that had just swallowed the chicken. Since it is fed, maybe he has a chance to escape. But the next moment, all his doubts disappeared. The snake opened his mouth and the hero had to flee. The machine that was clamped with its tail of the reptile began to slowly fall down. The roar was deafening when the car was rapidly falling to the ground. Fortunately, he remained intact, turning over, but stopping on 4 wheels. The soldiers could not believe in their luck. They were saved. The feeling of relief seized them. But Uncle Joe, looking at the situation, said that the car still could go. It was necessary to get out of here until it became too late. However, he decisively stated that they will have a different strategy. The soldiers did not share his enthusiasm and argued uneasily. If they did not leave now, the snake could return, and the supplies that they so diligently collected cannot be lost. The captain, turning to his comrades, recalled that the person who took the snake risked his life for them if they left him. As they could look into their eyes, seated, the soldiers were silent. The tension hung in the air, and they understood that the commander was right. Pod-apps are not as important as a person's life. They underwent special training, not in order to leave a comrade in trouble. Uncle Joe, making a decision, sharply pressed the gas, and the car moved forward. The man confidently maneuvered, asking the team to stay stronger. Their goal was clear. They had to help this person who saved them from imminent death. Meanwhile, the chicken coop stood unattended. His huge structure towered under the sky. Bai Feifei quickly jumped down, looking around. Surprise flashed in her eyes. The girl found that her companion was nowhere. It was strange and suspicious. The zombie thoughtfully walked along the fence, not yet fully understanding what was happening. Suddenly, she noticed the movement and instantly warmed up. These were several chicken, decisively and purposefully heading for her. Bai Feifei remembered what Ryusuke Takao told her. This plan could be adjusted. Having gathered all her strength, the zombie decided to act almost as he taught her. Without thinking twice, the zombie grabbed the first thing that came to hand. It turned out to be an excellent and rather heavy weapon. Bai Feifei confidently grabbed the bars, holding it with amazing ease. The next moment, the girl rushed forward, ready to bring her plan into action. Soon the chicken trapped, imprisoned behind the bars of the bars, and could not get out. Meanwhile, a terrible fight with a snake continued in the forest. The mutant inexorably pursued Ryusuke Takao, opening his terrible mouth with sharp teeth. The guy ran away in a panic. His eyes were full of horror. He shouted for help. But the system only replied that it could not use the reflection function without a special device. At some point, the snake surrounded the unfortunate guy. The young man realized that this could be the end when her rings clenched around his body. A few moments, and he could be in her mouth. A terrible feeling of approaching death captured him. Ryusuke Takao closed his eyes, resigned to a possible fate. Be that as it may, not to leave fate. The hero decided to accept her with dignity. But suddenly a familiar sound flew to his ears, clicking the chicken. The guy shouted in a rage why he hears these damned birds again. But at this time, a cell with chicken rushed rapidly through the forest, dissecting the oncoming air. Bai Feifei raced so quickly that she could not hold a smile. In her hands she held a giant cage with chicken, who seemed to be ready for battle. Soon, the girl resolutely pushed away from the ground, continuing to hold the cage. But the next moment, the heavy structure landed right on the head of the snake. The monster shook off the blow, and for a moment forgot that she was holding Ryusuke Takao in captivity. A strong shock made the reptile fall. Her head hurt terribly. Ryusuke Takao felt relief. Bai Feifei saved him on time. The young man could not hide joy. If not for her help, he would definitely die. But in the future, Ryusuke Takao thought that it was worth teaching her to distinguish work from entertainment. Such errors should no longer be repeated. Suddenly, the system said that she congratulates the owner. His cart was completely updated. A completely new apparatus arose in front of the amazed guys, which was hardly different from the old trolley, but was filled with new functions and capabilities. Ryusuke Takao was delighted. This is a real house on wheels with many useful devices. Everything was thought out to the smallest detail and perfectly suited for high-quality cooking. Each compartment looked luxurious and surprisingly functional. Ryusuke Takao could not hide admiration when he said that the system had finally showed generosity. It was a real luxurious gift that the guy had been waiting for so long. The conductor, without behind, said that he was always generous, and added that he had a special reward for Resuke. It was a map of skills, which in 3 minutes could significantly increase combat power. But the surprises did not end there. A new weapon was unlocked. The guy stared at the so-called weapon with surprise. It was a tisak, a scapula, and a noise. The hero immediately realized that such objects would not protect against the zombie. The system explained that this weapon of his new stall, but then warned that it should not be underestimated by kitchen accessories. They not only have built-in skills, but can also improve depending on the ability of the owner. Having calmed down a little, Resuke decided to try out the weapon in action. He was determined to understand what it was capable of. And so, fiercely laughing, he said that he would now deal with the reptile that ate his chicken. The conductor asked him not to laugh so terribly. The young man replied that this was not terrible, but quite usually. Resuke looked at Baifefe and invited her to play. The guy thoughtfully watched the snake, which was still under the shock. Looking at her, the hero said that now she could play as much as she wants. Waving the weapon, the young man quickly began to cut the snake, dividing it into several parts. Resuke Takao, with a concentrated look, continued to separate the tendons, developing an action plan. After that, he began to separate the meat from the bones, cutting everything into perfect pieces. Bai Feifei, having received the command to collect supplies, instantly rushed up, ready to complete the task. She deftly and quickly collected all the pieces, not missing a single one. In less than a few minutes, the girl perfectly cleaned everything. The lady skillfully sorted the ingredients, creating 2 large heaps. Resuke Takao could not take his eyes off his knife. It was a real work of art. And now, at the most unexpected moment, a new notification of the system came, which reported that they should complete a new task.